What is up, guys? Team Ignite here, and it's your boy Evan. Today I have for you a Nightrose deck profile, as well as a piloting guide on how to pilot my most sincerely favorite deck, Nightrose. So this is going to be a rather long video, so if you just want to get to certain parts such as piloting, deck building, or grades, just grades 3, 2, 1, 0, whatever you want, it's going to be in the descriptions below. And I hope that this deck profile just informs you and educates you on really just the capacity that Nightrose has and just how much you can dish out in a single turn. There's also going to be a deck profile post Rosal, even though English format doesn't have it yet. This is mostly for those who have access to Rosal because they're playing the JPN format. And just really how I want the deck to look like, in my own personal opinion, how it should function. There's more than one way to build Nightrose, but this profile is going to be more on utility and a balance type. If you have any more questions regarding this and you want to personally PM me or just ask me questions on why I said this in the video and why I have this tech, please feel free to comment down below, as well as to PM me in my Facebook profile, which I will also link down below. So for any of this video, there's also going to be timestamps on if you just want to fast forward, go back, or whatever, as well as there's also going to be a PDF and a link to a Google Drive to which this video is based off of. I'm not going to cover everything that's on the Google Drive or the PDF because it covers way too much. It's too detailed. So I'm just going to cover the main facts, and if you want to learn more, there you go. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And before we start, I just wanted to say that sorry for the lack of uploads. Life just happened. And now with 2018 rolling around, we're going to go back to a more regular schedule. Without further ado, here's my most favorite deck profile, Nightrose. Before we start the deck profile, I just wanted to let you all know the key mechanic that Granblue has that's really strong, which is Hollow. Hollow is a skill in which a unit is placed on the regular circle and you may declare that unit as Hollow. If you do declare that unit as Hollow, it gains some abilities as well as some skills. However, in exchange at the end of the turn, it has to retire, which in the long run is a good thing and a bad thing because in Nightrose you generally have no board unless you work for it. Other than that, Gouache's skill is that when this unit is retired from the regular circle due to the ability of Hollow, countercharge 2. This is why Nightrose has should not have much counter blast issues. If you do, you're doing something wrong. Also, couple this with Nightrose's GB2, you can basically refund your entire damage zone in one instance. But we'll get to that later in the video. Continuing with our grade zeros, we have 4 Rough-Seas Banshee. Rough-Seas Banshee's skill is an act. Put this unit into your soul. If you have a Granblue Vanguard, draw up to 1 card. So, it says draw up to 1 card. So, if you just want to fuel your soul and you don't want to really deck yourself out and lose, just do it and really just read the card. If it says up to, you can choose 0. So, don't draw unless you have to. But this is your main draw engine as well as your ramp engine, so it's a really good card to have as a 4-of, and it's in the trial decks too, so it's really easy to get. Next we have 4 heal triggers, Bernard the Ghosty. Bernard the Ghosty skill is that when this unit is discarded for the use of a G-Guard, which is Negrolily, you may discard a G-Guard from your hand and draw 1. So basically the first collection G-Guard, which will hopefully get replaced soon for the new heal, which the GBT 13 clans are getting, which is when this unit is dropped for a G-Guardian, you may bind itself with a copy of itself and you may either counter charge 1 or soul charge 1. If we get that, more resource management. Next we have 4 more crits, which is Rampage Shade. This is Nightrose's Persona crit, meaning that Rampage Shade's skill is that when your Vanguard with Nightrose attacks, you may soul charge this unit. If you do, keep your Vanguard plus 5k and draw a card. You have to draw a card with this card, so be careful when you're using it. But mainly this is your main offensive ramp engine, as well as your second primary source of drawing. Basically your crits, seeing them early game doesn't really hurt you. It just basically says, oh, your opponent can feel a little bit safer that you're not gonna crit sack them as bad. But there are times when you mill 6 crits, but yet you still double crit. It's insane. It's pretty funny. And next we have 4 stands. We have 1 Mick the Ghosty because he was sadly limited. However, Mick is still such a broken and good card. Mick's skill is that when this unit is placed on rigor from your drop zone, you may declare it as Hollow. If this unit is hollowed, you may give another unit plus 10k and it gets the skill auto. When this unit leaves the rigor circle, shuffle it back into your deck. So basically if it's retired or you just simply call over it, it's gonna go back into the deck, which is really good because since Nightrose blind mills a lot, It's good for refueling your deck and basically just stacking your stands later on. Next we have one performing zombie. The reason why I run performing zombie is because it's a selective milling from top 10. Usually the key card you want is generally in the top 10 by your second and third stride, because from there you only have between 20 to 10 cards left and you should just generally hit it, and because it's also a target for Dragut, which I will get into later when we hit the strat zone. And finally we have two stands. Screaming Banshee. Screaming Banshee is a good stand because its hollow skills. When it's used based on rearguard, meaning from drop zone or just from hand, you can declare another unit and make it hollow. So basically if you have Gouache on board and you can for some reason get him out and you draw into her, you can call her on board, declare her as hollow or not, your choice. Then declare Gouache as hollow to get a counter to end the turn, which is really good. And then her second skill is that when this unit is ready from rearguard circle due to the effect of the hollow, you may bind this unit and draw a card. So it's basically a draw engine, and again, another amazing target for Dragut. Now let's move on to the rest of the deck profile. Next we have the grade 1s. We're running one Head Start Zombie. So if you didn't already notice, I'm not running Chappie in this deck for the sole reason is that I don't like how Chappie is limited to simply guarding, meaning you can only use a maximum 3 times if you use them with Negrolily as well as just guarding from hand. Head Start Zombie does the exact same thing, is that when this unit is placed on rearguard and from the drop zone and it's hollowed, you may search your deck for up to 1 card and mill it. If you don't mill it, you blind mill the top of the deck. Really good card that's really been showing up in a lot of decks that have been topping lately in the JPN format. So I tried it, it worked really well, and I think I'm gonna keep it because I can use this card as many times as I want to selectively mill rather than just going into Obadiah and wasting a turn to really mill 3 specific units. I can just mill the 1 card and then continue on. However, there are times where you have to go into Obadiah, so do not assume that he will solve all your problems early game. Yes, and this unit is not restricted to milling hollow units, so which is also a plus. Next we have 4 of the most important key makers in the deck. Negro Bone. Negro Bone skill Generation Break 1. At the end of this unit, boosted a rearguard. If you have a Vanguard with Nightrose in its card name, you may pay the cost, which is kind of last one. If you do, retire the unit that this unit boosted, and choose up to 1 card for your drops and call it to the rearguard. So before we continue on, if the rearguard that Negro Bone is boosting disappears, whether it's retired due to a card like Denial Griffin or Header around it, you can still continue the rest of the skill. The boosted unit being retired is not part of this cost. It's more of like a side effect. So since Vanguard falls in the game of do as much as you can, basically if the boosted unit is no longer there, just kind of boss on a free card. You have to retire anything. Whoop. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Next we have 2 Bail the Ghosty. Bail the Ghosty is a free attacker basically, comboed with Negro Bone and other cards. Bail the Ghosty skill is when this unit is placed from the drop zone to the rearguard circle, you may have this unit gain plus 2k. Next, its second skill is when this unit is retired during the battle phase and you have a Vanguard with Nightrose in its card name, you may pay the cost. You may bottom deck this unit. If you do, counter charge 1. Basically, even during your opponent's battle phase, you can still counter charge. And basically, if you just, since we just also figured out what Bone was, if you boost Bail with Bone, you can basically call for free. Good stuff. Next, we have 3 Stride Fodders. Stride Fodders is mostly generic, I'm not really gonna go over it, but it's basically that this unit counts as a grade 3 as well as place on rearguard, reveal grade 3, add 9 to hand. That's basically what it is. If you know that I don't run 4, that's because of my other ratios, and running 3 is the most consistent for me personally. So all of you who just got triggered, you're welcome. Finally, we have the PGs. We have 1 Vanilla PG, which is Gust Jin, which is just a normal one that's unit placed on Guardian Circle, discard 1, nullify an attack. And next we have Seawall Banshee. Seawall Banshee, I would have to argue, is the best PG to use right now in Nightrose, for the sole reason that she has more consistency over the counter-charging PG, which is Water Spout Jin. If you are using Water Spout Jin, it's up to your discretion, but I preferably want to use Seawall more. because of her skills that when this unit is retired from the regular circle due to effect the Hollow ability, you make Soul Blast 1 and bottom deck copy yourself. If you do, add this unit to your hand and discard one. So basically you replace a card from your hand with her. Basically PG Recycler or an Ezra's clone, which is slightly worse, but you know what I mean. And the reason why we're running a vanilla PG is because you can superior Perfect Guard from the drop zone with this deck with the G Guardian, which you will get into later on. Continuing with this deck profile, I'm gonna move on to the grade 2s now. For the grade 2s, we're starting with King Serpent. King Serpent is the freest call from Nightrose because it scales when this unit is based on rear guard from the drop zone, Soul Charge 1 and Counter Charge 1. 8k base, but such a free call, and it sets up so many other plays. Really, really good. Next we have 3 actually, Scouting Cannoneers. Scouting Cannoneer is that when this Scouting Cannoneer skill is that when this unit is placed on a rear guard from drop zone, you may pay the cost, which is Counter Blast 1. If you do, choose up to 1 of your opponent's rear guards and retire, so you don't have to choose any. And then if this unit is hollowed, you may draw a card. So basically you can just declare this unit as hollow, Counter Blast 1, and not retire anything, just draw one. If they don't have any units left or they have resist, you don't have to target anything, you can just Counter Blast 1 and draw one. And again, Counter Blast is not an issue, so you can just, it's basically a free draw. Next we have our second key combo maker, Negrolily. Negrolily's skill is that Counter Blast and Soul Blast 1. When this unit is placed on rear guard, if you have a Vanguard with Nightrose in its card name, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose up to 1 grade 2 or less unit from your drop zone and superior call it onto the rear guard circle. If this unit was hollowed, it gets the red text, which is at the end of turn that this unit, at the end of turn, it's alright, this unit gets also plus 2k, and at the end of turn when this unit is put into a drop zone from the rear guard circle, Counter Charge and Soul Charge. So basically, if you have Lazy on the board until the end of turn, he basically refunds himself and refunds the soul that he used. So, really good. Next we have 3 1-ups that are remaining. One is Maltreat Shade. Maltreat Shade skill is that when this unit, Generation Break 1, when this unit is retired from the rear guard circle due to effect the Hollow ability, if you have Vanguard with Nightrose on this card, you may bottom deck this unit. If you do, Counter Charge 1. However, that is a really good skill. However, the main reason I run her is because, or her second skill, because when this unit attacks, if you have Vanguard with Nightrose in its card name, this unit gets plus 2k for every single hollow unit on your board, including yourself. Right now she hits awkward numbers without Rosal, but she still has her uses, meaning such as she refuels the deck and basically Counter Charges 1. That's her purpose basically, that deck right now. Next we have 1 Pocker for a Link Joker matchup. Pocker's skill is basically Soul Blast 1 when this unit is placed on the regular circle for every single face-up Crit Elemental in your G-Zone, unlock 1. So basically, your main counter to Link Joker if you're not comfortable enough not running Pucker. You don't need Pucker if you can just simply outplay them with using mechanics, but if you are like me and you just want the security of having Pucker, go ahead and run Pucker. This is Pucker slot. Finally, this is the new unit that I've never thought I would run in Nightrose, which is Rain Element Pecan. Pecan's skill is Act Generation Break 1, Counter Blast 1. Until the end of turn, all the units in the same column as this unit loses resist. The reason why I'm running this is solely because of the upcoming meta where everything is gaining resist, as well as Aqua Force is now resist force. We can remove that during our turn. Inherently, a lot of units in Aqua Force don't really have resist, but this is more so that we can fully control their board because Nightrose is a pseudo control deck. That's the reason why I run him. You can replace him with Rook, but I just prefer running Pecan because I want to completely control my opponent as much as possible. Finally, we're gonna move on to the grade 3s. For the grade 3s, we're gonna start off with 1 Mighty Rogue Night Storm. Night Storm skill is that Generation Break 1. At the end of this unit, attack the Vanguard. You may pay the cost. If you do, choose up to 1 card not named this card and call it to the regular circle. So basically a battle phase call. Really, really good, and there's many combos you can do with this unit. Next we have Zombie Whale of the Ocean Depths. Zombie Whale of the Ocean Depths is basically a Negrosong on steroids. Basically it's hollow rear generation break. When this unit attacks the Vanguard, if this unit is hollow, this unit gets 1000 for every 2 cards in your drop zone. So basically, think of it like this. From first to second stride, it's basically a 5 to 10k shield. Anything after that is between a 10k to a 20k shield. It's basically how you have to think of it, just so they can get a better grasp of the game. Next we have 2 Vampire Princess of Starlight, Nightrose. This Nightrose is not as good on Vanguard because you don't have the GB2 that the original had, and it's mostly good on a regular circle for a loop, as well as a, well, it's no longer a loop with Rosal, but it's still a viable combo. So her skill is that on Vanguard and Rearguard, act once per turn, Generation Break 2, when a unit is placed on Rearguard from your drop zone Soul Blast on, put a grade 1 from the drop zone behind this unit. So you can see where this will combo in, as well as its stride skill is on Vanguard when your G unit strides, you counterblast and you may mill up to 3. If you do Superior Call 1 unit and if that unit has a hollow ability, give it plus 3k. So it's not as good, but it's there because Nightrose's name, as well as I'd rather be on these two than these two. One, because he's a horrible base to be on grade 3, and this is a 9k base because of its second skill, which is continuous Vanguard or Rearguard. If the number of cards in your drop zone is 5 or less, it gets minus 3k. So I'd rather be on an 11k basis that has Nightrose in the card name other than a 9k base. And finally, we have the bread and butter of the deck, the main grade 3 Vampire Princess of Nightfog, Nightrose. So this unit's skills are Generation Break 2 once per turn, Mill 3, when your Rearguard is retired, you may pay the cost, which is Mill 3 if you do revive that unit. So this skill alone provides so many shenanigans during the end turn and during your opponent's turn. It just provides so many shenanigans. And her stride skill is that when your G unit strides, you may pay the cost, which is counterblast, and if you do call unit, give it plus 2k, which is better than her, which is hollow condition, and the GB2 is basically what makes this deck so good. So now we'll move on to the G zone. For the G zone, we're gonna start with the English format, so basically the one that everyone has access to regardless of where they are in the world. So we're gonna start with 2 Negrosonger. So Negrosonger is basically your early endgame as well as your main offense. So Negrosonger's skill is Counterblast 1 G-Flip itself. At the end of battle, this unit attack the Vanguard, you may pay the cost. If you do, discard a card from your hand and look up top 4 and mill up to 1. And then call a unit from your drop zone onto a regular circle. And for every single face-up G unit you have in your G zone, it gets plus 5k. So on first stride, it basically gives you a unit that's beefed up 5k. Late game, the unit can be basically be plus 25k or more. The reason why I don't want to really emphasize this card is because it basically eggs your hand 1 during the turn, and you only net 2. Assume if you're just doing drive checks, you only net 2 that turn. So only do Negrosonger if your hand is stable, meaning 6 to 8 cards, or preferably more than that, and you just want to dish out some raw offense, or you really just need to close out the game. Negrosonger is your card, because that GB restricted. Next we have 1 Sabreeze. Sabreeze, basically if they want to grade 2 game you activating GB1 with Sabreeze, and the Counterblast 2 is basically negligible because you can refund it immediately if you have Screaming in hand and you had Gouache on board. Boom, you just Counterblasted 2 and drew 1 at the end of turn. Pretty good, right? And also Counterblast 2 doesn't really matter as long as you trip GB so that you can activate more of your combos while your opponents are grade 2 to punish them. Next we have Obadiah. Obadiah is your first stride if your drop zone's absolute garbage, meaning you're not seeing your key unit. Obadiah skills: when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, search your deck for up to 3 cards and put them into your drop zone and shuffle your deck. And if 2 or more of those cards are units with the hollow ability, choose up to 1 unit with Ghost in its card name from your drop zone and call it to the Vanguard Circle behind this unit. The second part is kind of lackluster because you just get a 7k booster, but it's mostly just so that you can fetch 3 cards and prep your drop zone. If you start Obadiah and after you have GB2, perfect. If you don't, well, you're gonna be at GB1 until next turn, which is rather slow, but sometimes it happens and you just gotta work with it. Next we have 1 Dragut. Dragut is your board control as well as, I think board control sums him up. Dragut skills: Generation Break 2, Counterblast 2, and discard 1. You may pay the cost. If you do, call as many units from your drop zone equal to your number of rear guards, and for every single rear guard code with the hollow ability, your opponent retires one, chooses to retire one, and if your opponent has 0 board, you draw one. So basically his cost is refunded if your opponent has low board, or you basically wipe it out. However, it gets harder. However, the cost gets heavier the moment your opponent has more than 2 units on board, and it hurts way more if they have resist, hence why that grade 2 is alive, so that we can snipe out those resist units and they can actually choose them. But the reason why we run him is because you can target cards such as Seawall, so that even though you're losing a turn of aggro and you're just really pseudo controlling or controlling your opponent's board, you can still draw 2 from Seawall by just binding her. Because Seawall is mostly a one and done unit after she's out of deck anyway, so Dragut, really good board control, as well as just a board wipe in general. Next we have 4. Tempest Calling Pirate King Gouache. Gouache's skill is Candle Blast and Soul Blast. When this unit is placed on the Vanguard circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, Soul Blast X amount of soul up to 5 only, and for every card Soul Blasted after the initial cost, Superior call 1 unit from your drop zone, and those unit gets plus 1k for every single basic card in your G zone. Basically, if you soul charge those rough seas early game and you just blasted them out on first stride, and then you call 4, you just basically plus 4 on top of your drive check, so you just plus 7. You basically drew into either heals, shields, or key units, so you don't have to even Obadiah anymore. You just drew into everything you need, and you're gonna end up in drop zone by just guarding anyway. So he basically is your ramp card, as well as another control card, because you can call cannoneers just to snipe out other units, as well as just a defensive card, because if you just want to build defenses, you can just straight up draw. And really, this card can call off full board. However, it is soul reliant. That is why when Ozo comes out, he's going to be dropped onto a 2-of. Finally, next unit is our GB8 Immortal Galleon, the cheesiest GB8 in the game, because his skill is GB8. When it's used placed on Vanguard circle, choose up to 5 units from your drop zone and call them to the Regular circle. They all get plus 10k, and at the end of the turn, retire them. So there's some disgusting plays you can pull off with this little missy, and it's a guaranteed and solid game ender. Solid. It's not guaranteed. It should be guaranteed. Since you are Nightrose, you want to just, the moment you hit GB8, it should be guaranteed win for you, unless they somehow heal sack you twice at 6 damage. Basically, that's the only way they're gonna let GB8. Next, we have the G guards. We're running 1 Negrolily. Negrolily's skill is Counter Blast. When it's used placed on the Guardian circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, retire 1 unit, and this unit gets plus 10k shield. And you may choose up to 1 Ghosty unit, normal Ghosty unit from your drop zone, and call it to the Regular circle. So this is where I'm saying you can call Bail, because you can retire Bail on your opponent's battle phase, assuming you already have GB1, and then just make her cost free and give plus 15k shield. Or you can basically call Bail with her skill, then use Negrosonger GB2 to revive the retired unit and call it over Bail, so you counter charge 1, and you can trip off so many more combos after that, which we'll get onto later, but that's just the general aspect of it. Next we have a Cray G guard, Air Element, Ractome. Ractome skill is very simple. When it's used in the Guardian circle, you may pay the cost, which is discard 1. If you do, draw 1. You don't have to discard it, you can just guard with it. It's a Cray Elemental, target for Pucker, really good. Next we have another Cray Elemental, Mix Element, Callburn, which is going to come out in GB in the set. It's going to come out in 2 days from now. Really good card to have in the deck, because its skills, when it's used in Guardian circle, you may discard 1. If you do, during the battle, your opponent's Vanguard attack, you may pay the cost, which is discard 1. If you do, this unit gets plus 5k for every 2 cards in your opponent's hand. So basically, if you're against someone like Luard, or they're really just draw heavy, or they just have for some reason massive hand, this is a massive ass shield. It's part of my language there. Also, really, the moment your opponent has more than 6 cards in their hand prior to drive check, this is better than screw you. Really good. Next we have 2 Diabolist of Solicitation Negrolily. Negrolily is the reason why you can Superior Perfect Guard from Drop Zone, because her skills Soul Blast 1 and G flip a G Guardian. When this is on Guardian circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose up to 2 cards with 2 different grades and place them onto the Guardian circle. And since the vanilla PG is not hand restricted, you can PG. So basically, for Soul Blast 1 and discard 2, you can nullify Vanguard's attack. And with in a meta where there's restanding vanguards as well as vanguards that gain crit, you sometimes don't want to take the chance of them getting triple triggers and passing, you know? So, really good card. As well as, this card is the reason why after first stride, if you have 3 heals, you can use Turbo to GB8. Cheese. And finally, we have the ZR, which is Xerath Dragon of Distant Seas, Megiddo. Megiddo's skill is so good in Nightrose, however, it's the best in Aqua Force. However, this is an alternative game ender as opposed to Gouache, Galleon, and Negrosonger. You basically have 4 game enders now. And his skill is Counterblast 2. When it's used based on ranking, you may choose up to 5 units from your hand and drop zone combined, call them the Rearguard Circle, and they get plus 5k. And the ability, at the end of this unit, attack the Vanguard, switch this unit with another Rearguard. And since it's an ultimate stride, you need to Persona drop, meaning you have to discard a copy of Nightrose to stride this unit. However, this is basically half of what Galleon is, except it gets a column switching ability, and for Counterblast 2. But remember, you're Nightrose, so if you just call 2 King Serpents, that Counterblast 2 is gone and just filled up your soul. However, keep in mind that if you do fail this stride, you have no GB and you're basically a sitting duck. And that's a deck profile right now. That's a deck profile. And with Rosal, the only thing that's gonna change is that Negrosonger and Gouache is gonna be down to a. So Gouache is gonna be down to a 2-of. So a pair of Gouache is gone and Negrosonger is just gone because Rosal does so many things that these two can do better, and she just really requires as a 4-of. Rosal's skill is Act, Counterblast 1, Persona Flip. Alright, for every single face-up card in your G-Zone, call up to 1 unit plus 1. So basically, if you have 1 face-up card, you call 2. So for every single face-up card plus 1, you call a unit from your drop zone. So already on first stride, you get to call 2 units. And the second part of its skill is that if you call 3 or more units with this unit's skill, this unit gets a crit. So it's inherently already a crit, and this act forces hollow. So even if the unit does not have hollow, it'll be hollowed because though the units called with this effect have to retire at the end of the turn. Therefore, they're given forced hollow. And her second skill is an auto ability, which is when at the beginning of battle phase, for every single Nightrose in your drop zone, give a unit on your board plus 5k. So basically, if you have 4 Nightroses in drop zone, your 2 Rearguard columns just spiked by 10k power. So good, right? That's the only thing that really changed from the G-Zone. Main deck wise, you're probably gonna run 1 more Maltreat because her issues are now being solved inherently because it's forced hollowed, so those units count, I believe, but I have to double check that. But really, Maltreat is probably going to be more useful in the deck, as well as she's the reason why Headstart Zombie is also going to be really, really useful, because you're just gonna stride her for offense, and you can use call out Headstart Zombie just for selective milling later on. So yeah, that's the deck profile. And next, we're gonna go on to the combos. So our first combo is one that involves Negrolily. So this is just a pseudo field. There's no real drops. So I didn't really set up a pseudo game. It's more just like so you can get a general idea of what you can do with Negrolily. With Negrolily, basically with her alone, you can call any of these units, and really the only condition you need to have is you need to have GB2 at the end of your turn, as well as you need to have Lazy on board. Anywhere is fine as long as you can use Negrolily to kill Lazy. So how you normally should do is that, it attacks, Generation Guard, so discard and heal. You call Negrolily to the Guardian Circle. Negrolily's skill activates, Counterblast 1, retire 1. Here you may choose, here I would choose to resolve Negrolily's skill and call Bail. You don't have to call Bail, however, I would usually call Bail to get the counter charge off, or if you're setting up for Dragut, you can also call Tell Me to Ghosty Brother just so you can get another rearguard count prior to the stride skill of your next turn. Sorry about that. And now basically you can either call him for rearguard count for Dragut, or you can call him for counter charge. But assuming we're gonna do the counter charge round, next we do GB2 since Negrolily's got retired and mill 3 units. 2, 3, and we call the unit that was retired. onto Rigor Circle on top of Bale. Since it's during battle phase, Bale's skill will activate. Since I have a Nightrose Vanguard and it's during battle phase, counter bottom deck, counter charge 1, basically making it skill free. Now we use Lazy skill to counter blast 1, soul blast 1. So here you can call any of these units. This isn't so easy to drop one. So in the most common defensive combo is calling Mick, declaring him as hollow and making your Vanguard permanent 21k base for the rest of your opponent's turn, which is really detrimental, especially since this goes back to your deck and this counter charges 1. So generally, you want to put Lazy in the back so you still get the counter and soldiers at the end of turn, as well as so that you can put Mick back into the deck. But even if they don't really want to hit Mick during battle phase anyway, that's gonna go back to the deck anyway. But yeah, sort of part of it. So now you're bringing a 21k base, and this will refund itself, and Mick will go back into the deck. Another option, if let's say you had 2 more counter blasts and you couldn't refund it last turn, you can call Gouache, so at the back row as well with Lazy. So at the end of turn, you can counter charge 3 and soul charge 1. Therefore, the 2 counter blasts that you weren't able to refund in your last turn is refunded. Another option is simply another Bale, just so that you can set up for Dragut, as well as yeah, this is mainly just a setup for Dragut, and as well as so it's already on board prior to your stride skill, so you don't have to call it. You can just call another unit like King Serpent during your next stride turn. Or you can call Seawall. So at the end of turn, you can get a PG back to hand. I believe that's what Seawall said. Yes. So the reason why I'm mentioning this combo is because at times when you have a grade 2 and a grade 0 in hand, you can't stride next turn into your kill turn, and you have Negrolily and you have this combo available. You can do this, declare as hollow in the back row, discard the grade 0 and then turn and draw her so you can stride. This is basically a stride fixer, as well as if you just want to add a PG a turn earlier. The next option you can call Maltreat. The reason why I can also call Maltreat is for the same reasons that you can either get double intercept, or at the end of turn you can refuel your deck and counter charge 2. Basically the same reason as Gouache. However, her one plus side is that you get to bottom deck her so that you can draw next turn. Basically, sometimes if you have 1 card left, basically if you have, let's say, 4 cards left in the deck and you know what they are, since generally Nightrose doesn't shuffle the deck, aside from either Obadiah or Head Start, you generally don't shuffle the deck yourself. So generally, what'll happen is that if you use Bale early, right, and you have like 4 cards in deck, you can use this combo, use Generation Make 2 so you only have 2 cards in deck. Bottom deck her, so that now you basically only have 2 cards left in deck. The reason why you want to do this is because you depending on how, if you remember where Bale is positioned at the bottom of your deck, you can mill those Bales so that next turn you can revive them, or you can use the Mortal Galleon to just basically end your opponent's face. And this is also a great snap card when you're like, oh, I have 2 cards left in deck, or like I have 5 cards left in deck, but I need to set up for my next turn. So you can just mill 3 bottom deck and still be sure that you can still draw next turn. Basically, it's just a deck refueler and a counter charge. Another option is this option, because this option is good because another double intercept, or as well as you can counter charge 1, just refund this cost right there, soul charge 1. Basically what this combo does is that it increases your soul by a count of 1 prior to your next turn. So basically, let's say at the end of your last stride turn you had 3 cards in soul. You use this combo, you're down to 2 cards in soul. He refunds Lazy back to 3 cards in soul, and you intercept with him to send him back if you don't have another copy in drop zone. End of turn, Lazy will add another card in soul because that's what his skill states. So therefore, basically, you're increasing your soul by 1 during your opponent's turn, and next turn you can use stride skill to increase your soul by another card. So now you have 5 cards in soul. If you use Gouache, you can call 4 units. That's basically my thought process around it. And the next unit is one of my favorites, and this is the pseudo denial chicken. Basically, everything's the same except the only addition is that when you call Cannoneer, you can counterblast an extra unit, retire the attacking unit, and draw a card. So if they don't resist, they're gonna get retired. And if it's your opponent's Vanguard, this is a 36k shield. You can choose to hollow, retire any other rear guards, like if it's like Blaster Blade, you can retire a Flogel, or like it's like if for example like ZTB, if they have like a Transit Dragon, you can retire that so they don't draw anymore, and you draw one card, and what you can do next is you can intercept with this, so now you have a 41k shield on top of you just egg your opponent one rear guard and you drew one. And then in turn you refund one of the costs, so yeah, it kind of solves for itself. So generally those are the main combos that go with Negrolily, just Negrolily. So before we start with the remaining G-Zone units, I just wanted to say right now I'm gonna go over every single possible combo. That's gonna take way too long, and I'm pretty sure most of it you can just figure out, and you can just figure it in that moment or through your own struggles. But I'm just gonna say right now when's the ideal time to use Negrosonger, when's the worst time to use Negrosonger, and really what's his advantages and his weaknesses. So first we're gonna start off with when's the worst time to use Negrosonger. It's the worst time to use Negrosonger when you have no other key cards on board, mainly Negrobone. If you have no board set up prior to Negrosonger, it's pretty shaky already. But the moment you have 4 damage, 4 or more damage, 4 to 5, and you have less than 6 cards, and this is after Dragut check, so if you begin the turn with less than basically 3 or 4 cards, do not use Negrosonger unless you know you can end it that turn. Because if you don't, your hand's literally going to be 6 and less, and I doubt you can survive a lot of the meta current tier 1 decks with 6 cards in your hand. And the most ideal time to use Negrosonger, in counterpart to that, is when you have just one Negrobone on field, and after Stride skill, you have another key combo maker like playmaker like Night Storm, Starlight, or even just after Veil. You basically just have 2 units. So this is my ideal. This is the ideal setup, because with Stride skill this is now 16k column, and you get a free call right after this. So yeah, overall it works out. The main targets you want for Negrosonger are any combo makers, You want Storm if you haven't called Storm yet. You want Starlight for Starlight combos. Whale for big beat stick. Deck refund. Steroids, more combos, defense. And if you're, let's say you let's just say that after Negrosonger attacks and you pay his cost, you have 0 counterblast left. You can call King Serpent to open up 1 counterblast to do 1 more hurrah or 1 more combo after Negrosonger. So ideally, with this setup, you can basically lash out quite a lot of combos. Just to show you an example, basically here. Let's just say I continued on with this. I have 5 open counterblast, and let's assume that I have let's assume I just have 3 face cards in G-Zone, like just these 3 cards face in G-Zone. So, attack 1, 16, skill, counterblast, bottom deck, counter charge. In my head, I'm gonna go for Night Storm. The reason being is that I don't know how many triggers I have left in deck, and if I was to hit a stand, this is where you have to just judge yourself based on the damage zone as well as based on what's in your drop zone, what you have left in deck really. So I would use Night Storm if I'm confident I can probably, if I'm not certain that I'm gonna hit a stand or not, or there's a higher chance of me hitting a stand, I would call Night Storm. Even then, I would still call Night Storm so I can keep comboing. Because if your opponent's at 4 damage, or at 5 ideally, if you have Negrosonger, you can attack with 11, activate his skill, and call Starlight. The reason you want, let's get the RLR version, just for expensive value. The reason why I'm gonna call RLR is because she'll reset later on. I'll show you. This is the variant where you can use a Starlight loop. I'm just using the Starlight loop because it's actually the most effective course of action right now. So yeah, here's it. 26 triple drive. Stand. If it did hit a stand, right? I'm gonna stand Storm instead. And finally PG. So 2 PGs and a stand, assuming that that's exactly what I got. Next, I use Negrosonger's skill to counterblast 1. Since it's just a demonstration, I'm just gonna look at top 4, middle 1, not gonna shuffle my deck, and I'm gonna discard 1. Next, I'm gonna call any unit from my drop zone, and it'll get plus. like 20k. I'm gonna call a bone because I'm still gonna keep setting up. Next, Starlight sees bone, and since you run 4 bone and the third one's probably in drop zone by at this point, call the bone over the bone. So now you basically just reset both your columns. And you're also gonna address some interactions as well. So, if for example, bone boosts storm, you can use their skills in any order, it'll still trigger. So therefore, if you use bone skill first, trigger and recall storm, because you can call the unit, you can call a unit retired, because the stages that bone skill goes is that you retire the boosted unit, then you call a unit from draw. So you can basically call itself. Even if the original Night Storm was retired, since this is technically a new unit, you can still use its own skill because it's still in queue to trigger. So you can, either way, you want to use Storm skill first, sure. If you want to use Bone skill first, sure. You can basically use Bone skill to reset Storm and call something else here, which is basically what my next part is. So assuming I did get a stand trigger, right? This is going to be 16, it's going to get powered here. It's going to be plus 20k, 48. So then I would just kind of blast 2. Next, what I would do here really is I would reset Storm. Then from here, since I only have 1 counter blast left open, I want to open up a little bit more chance for myself. I just think his opponent's not dead yet. To soul charge 1, counter charge 1. So I have 2 open counter blasts left. Since Storm's reset, I can basically swing for 15, activate this skill to retire 1. Next with Storm skill, I can call Bone. Next with Negro Bone skill, with Negro Bone skill, you can only call a hollow unit. So in that case, I would really just call Whale, give it hollow. At this point, the Whale's probably swing 21 plus, it's 15, 20k shield plus another 5k shield. And after Night Storm, you can choose to either call Gouache or Mech to further beef this up. Or since you only have 1 kind of blast left, you can call PG if you really want to get a PG to hand, assuming your hand's greater than 2. So yeah, from there, this is just a really basic explanation of the Negrosonger, and just when you want to use them, when you don't want to use them, when's the worst time to use them. The next unit we're gonna talk about is gonna be Gouache. Our next G unit is Tempest Calling Pirate King Gouache. So, like with the Negrosonger combo video, I'm just going to show you basic combos of Gouache and advantages, disadvantages, and ideal time to use them. The not as ideal time to use them, and when you should really not use Gouache, is on your first stride. If you don't have the soul, let's say you didn't draw into crits, right? You couldn't fuel your soul prior to first stride. Do not Gouache if you only have 2 cards in soul, because really, if you Gouache and you only have 2 cards in soul and you don't even have a King Serpent in drop, you're gonna egg your soul and you won't have any more soul, and it's really hard to recover the soul from there on forth. So if for some reason on first stride you don't have 0 GB and you have 2 cards in soul, I would really just Obadiah just to prep for soul next turn, just prep your drop zone. Or I would even just Negrosonger if I know I can go aggro and I have low damage and I have some key units in hand that I can use to just dish out attacks. The ideal time to use Gouache is on first stride, mid game, or late game, when you have basically between 5 to 6 cards in soul after Serpent. Basically what this means that as long as you can call between 4 to 5 units ideally, you can call up to 3, but that's a little shaky, but as long as you can call 4 to 5 units, regardless of what they are, Gouache pays off, because on first stride, generally what you want to do is that you want to poop, if you soul charge crits, you want to poop out the crits and shove them back into just plus your hand. So instead of milling your cards to get them in drop, you can just draw into them for shield value, as well as so you can just guard with them and end up in drop zone anyway. Gouache is also another pseudo game ender, because sometimes, for some reason, they live Immortal Galleon Turbo, and after they do, I have like 8 face-up cards in G, since this is GB8. I stride to Gouache next turn, and I have an abundance of soul, then all you see randomly is a Gouache that's like, oh, it's another Galleon, because it gave all the units it called like 9k left. That's pretty disgusting in of itself. But really, the most optimal time to use Gouache is to build hand and to close games, or to just get a decent number of attacks. And remember, this is soul reliant, so if you have less than 2 cards in soul, especially in your first stride, and you don't have King Serpent to even add on to that soul, do not, and I mean do not use Gouache, because if you cannot even get at least 2 cards in your soul after you Gouache again, it's not worth the Gouache, because it cripples a lot of your plays during your opponent's turn if you have GB2. Let's say you have 0 cards in soul, and you want a GB2 but you have no soul for lazy, yeah, so your defensive combo is not gonna work. Basically, that's what it's saying. So, since Gouache is a soul reliant stride, it's a soul reliant game ender, draw power, and board setup. But ideally, assuming that this is your soul, you should have more crits in this. So assuming you have more crits in drop zone, ideally you have 4 cards in soul. So next, begin a stride skill. Use the stride skill, counter to soul charge 1. So basically now you can call up to 4 units. Ideally, what I would call here is that I would just call crits. So G flip 1, all call units gets plus 1k. Assuming this is your first stride, I would just really call crits. Like just straight up call 4 crits. The reason why you want to do this is because on your second stride, or second time you use Gouache, the next time you call these crits will be another tier of power. So basically, assuming you don't G-guard, the next time you Gouache, all call units will get plus 3k. So this becomes a 5k shield. So all these rampage shields become a 5k shield, so they're already a threat because they're punching out a 5k shield. And after, you're basically drawing 3 or 4 on top of your 3 drive checks. So basically, you're netting 7 again this turn. This way, Gouache is really good because it fixes your hand as well as you don't even have to call crits. Let's say, right? You can just call more rough seas. Assuming that these are rough seas, right? You can just call 4 rough seas, soul charge 4 on during the main phase, draw 4, and then let's say you had the bones in hand. Like you had bones in hand and you had storms in hand, you can basically just draw 4 so that you can drop those key units onto the board, so you don't have to even use any more resources to call them, and whatever cards you dropped is replaced and you just netted 2, right? So it's basically a way to set up board without using any cost or using your drop zone. You can just use your hand. At the end of the turn, they go to the drop zone anyway. Basically, you're abusing all your cards to their maximum potential, to the point where even if they're not in drop zone, they're still useful. Basically, in Nightrose, if they're not in damage, they're not in bind, and they're not in bind, they're usable. In deck, they're usable. You can just fetch them out. The moment they hit your hand, your board, or your drop zone, they are 100% fair game and fair use. Assuming we continue on the turn, assuming I had this much after stride skill, I would call 4 units. I would obviously call RFCs, just the fuel soul. But then, depending on how late we are into the game, let's say we have 4 open counter forward G-zone face up, right? I would call Bone, I would call Storm, and most importantly, I would call another Bone. The reason why is because I know I have 5 open counter blast, and even just disregarding my hand, this is a lot of attacks because I have a draw 1, draw a heal. This is a lot of attacks. Basically, this is a 17k column, this is an 18k column. Basically, after this 17k attack, I can call another Rook, if you run Rook, a Whale, or basically a mix, so I can beef up this column further, and from this column alone, I get 2 calls. So basically, in this one turn, I can basically dish out close to, like, anywhere from 6 or greater attacks, depending on what my drive checks is, as well as, that's including my banger attack too. So basically, it's an offensive card as well as a defensive card as well as a ramp card. I mostly use it just as a ramp card, but on the off chance that you have to use it offensively because you have to end game really quickly, or for some reason they survive your GB8, or you just turboed for lulls and they survive, you basically have another Galleon on top of the other strides. It's pretty funny. So yeah, that's really Gouache. I'm not going to go into more further detail because that's essentially what Gouache is. If you have any more questions, feel free to PM me. And other than that, let's move on to the next G unit, which is Dragut. So for this part of the video, we're going to talk about Pirate King of Redemption Dragut, your main board control, board wipe, and pseudo draw power, because you can draw with this unit. So basically, the moment you don't want to use Dragut is when you have literally no card on board, because that's gonna egg your hand to even set up, and you have low damage does hurt Dragut, but as soon as you have 3 to 4, Dragut's basically fair game. But it's safer if you have 4 damage. But for this example, I'm gonna use a low damage of 3. Yeah. Never Dragut if you have less than 1 unit on board. Dragut requires a bit of setup, which you can do in your last turn. So if in your last stride turn, right? Let's say in your last stride turn you called out a lazy. At the end of your last turn, you end up with a lazy. You can do the one Negrolily combo, so that you can call lazy. You can even call lazy as a non-hollow, so that you don't even need the soul for this one. You can just call lazy, then you can just call Bale or something. So now you have a plus of 2 units. So let's assume that that's what you did, right? So your Thavas will be 1 because you didn't hollow Negrolily. You just use a skill. Next, you would use a stride skill to call someone like Serpent, so that you can actually use Dragut's skill. Soul Charge 1. So, ideally, you want to have at least 3 or 4 units after stride skill, so that you can minimize the egg in your hand, you know, as much as possible, right? Because most decks cannot generate a full field. The only exceptions really are Gold Paladin, World Paladin to some extent, OTT, and Aqua Force. Really, if your opponent has a full board and they're really weird reliant, such as Aqua Force or Royal Paladin, where they need like the key units to stay on board, Dragut's your best friend, because even if those units have resist per se, right? You're still gonna egg a lot of their key units, because only Aqua Force right now has a lot of resist. And if you can even first stride Dragut, generally Dragut is also a solid first stride. The reason why is because most of the time you want to go early aggro as Nightrose, so you're gonna have 2 to 3 cards prior to stride skill. So if you G-guarded and you went first, you can Dragut relatively safely, in my opinion, just to retire their board. And it's even safer if you have Screaming and drop, right? But it's ideally not your first stride, it's mostly your second or third stride. It's mainly just meant to board control, not really to do much else other than that. So assuming we only have 3 damage, we're going to use Dragut's skill, Counterblast 1, we're going to discard 1, and we're going to call up to 3 units. Ideally what you want to call, regardless of the number, let's say you only have 3 units, ideally what you want to call is Screaming. You want to call as many hollow units, so we'll go Screaming, Gouache, and preferably another Screaming. Yeah, you'll call both your Screamings. The reason why is because assuming that these 3 hollow units were enough and that you were able to retire your opponent's field, you basically refunded Dragut's discard cost. Next, at the end of turn, you can just use GB2 to make all of your damages on face up, and then turn you get to +2 instead. So this turn you're not gonna be really aggro. You're sacrificing your offense for control and hand power, hopefully. If not, if you really just need the control and you really just need certain units gone, then use Dragut. And this is the reason why I run that one tech unit, which was, I believe, where'd it go? That's a little awkward. Oh, here it is. Pecan. So ideally when you want to use Pecan is when you have, let's say when you have 4 damage, right? And because the good thing about Nightrose is that it doesn't really care what units you use and if you can utilize it to their full extent. So let's say that in my last stride turn, right, I gouged and I called 4 crits and a Pecan. I +4 and I just have Pecan on board because I know my opponent can't really retire Pecan. On my next and on my defensive turn, I use Negrolily. But in this example, we're not gonna use Negrolily. We're just gonna go to the next stride phase. We have 4 open counterblast. Stride skill. I'm gonna use King Serpent to countercharge 1, soul charge 1. So basically a free call. What's gonna happen here is that since last turn I ramped, I should have a surplus of cards since not a lot of decks can go really aggro on first stride, and usually on their first stride they're only gonna be able to punch out at least 4 cards really. So you should still be fine with Dragut. And if they have resist, right, this is where Pecan comes in useful. I would call actually, if you have a crit hand, that's even better. If you have a Rough Seas, call the Rough Seas here, use Pecan skill first to remove the resist, then use Dragut. That way they cannot choose the resist unit to retire, which they have to. Then I would call the same setup, 3 units. I'll call the same setup, but not over the crit. The reason why I don't want to call it over the crit is that I can soul charge the crit and draw one. The reason here is because if their board's retired, right, you refund Dragut's cost, and since you didn't and the discard you had earlier with the crit goes in soul, and you didn't really discard earlier to build the number of your rear guards. Furthermore, end of turn you get to draw 2, and for mill 3 you get to countercharge 2. And for mill 3 you can countercharge 4 if you even want. You can just even stick with countercharge 2. That should kind of comes in useful. Again, of course it's not gonna be an aggro turn. However, you are gonna get a lot of control in, as well as still net you enough so that you're never falling behind your opponent. In this deck, you should never really be scared of decking out, because by that time you should even be close to decking out. You should be prepping for your endgame, or they should already be dead. Yes, basically the point of that is you just have to really think ahead and have intuition to think about, ideally 3 to 4 turns ahead, but if you can just think a couple turns ahead, that'll already help you a lot. So generally that's when you want to use Dragut. You don't want to use Dragut with low damage. You don't want to use Dragut in a sense that where after you Dragut and then a turn that you actually minus hand, ideally. So assuming that you started the turn with 7 cards in hand, but at the end of the turn after drive check you stayed at that number, or you actually ended up with less cards, that was a bad Dragut turn. That's when you don't want to use Dragut, and you should really only use Dragut if you can afford it, or if you desperately need to retire units and you don't have King Serpent, and you don't have Cannoneers. So another tip with Dragut is that, assuming I have 5 counterblasts, right? Assuming I have 5 counterblasts, and assuming I had 4 rear guards on board, I would actually call 2 Cannoneers, because even assuming that I can call a full board, I would call these 3 plus 2 Cannoneers. The reason being is that if they're basically this is a full board wipe. Assuming they have a full board wipe, right? You get the draw card to refund this cost. Even if they don't have any units targeted for Cannoneers, since Cannoneer skill says you may choose up to 1 rear guard to retire, you can just counterblast when the Declaramus Hollow and draw 2 more cards. Plus, at the end of the turn, you get to draw 2 cards from this, and for mill 4, you can countercharge 4. Basically, for a counterblast of 1 the entire turn, you basically plus 1, 2, 3, 4 on top of your drive check. So you're basically plus 7, essentially the same as Gouache, but you didn't use your soul. The only thing you used was basically a mill 3 and 1 counterblast. It's basically the only difference. Now that's a really ideal Dragut turn, and a really fully controlled and well thought out Dragut turn. Basically that's how Dragut, for me, that's its focal points, and that's when he should be used. And I hope that this helped you with Dragut. If you have any more questions with Dragut, as with the previous strides, feel free to PM me. The next card that the next stride that we're gonna discuss is Immortal Galleon. The next stride that we will be discussing is the cheesiest GB8 in my opinion in the game, Immortal Galleon. So Immortal Galleon is GB8, and of course with all GB8s it's basically meant as a game ender, and we're gonna discuss it as a game ender. There's really no bad time to Galleon per se, because the moment you can Galleon, you usually have all the key cards you have in drop zone, and the point of Galleon is that even if you have like 1 counterblast, you can still do stuff with Galleon, you know? Galleon basically provides a way for you to do stuff with no cost. So assuming that I'm gonna show you personally my most ideal Galleon turn, and for that we need 1 card in deck and just a Galleon and just really 1 card in hand. That's the only thing we need. So assuming I have 1 card in hand, ideally I just want a grade 1, so PG, whatever. This is a PG. We're gonna use Galleon skill. We're not gonna use straight skill in this at all because we want to maximize as much as we can. We're gonna use Bale, Bone, finally Mick. So everything gets plus 10k, these two get an extra plus 2k due to the fact that, sorry about that, due to the fact that their on-call skill from drop zone, they get plus 2k, and Mick is hollowed so that I can give the plus 10k to this bone. The reason why I always give it to this bone is because when you have 1 card left in deck, you're gonna almost guarantee hit this stand. So earlier I said you only need 1 card, call the card over Mick. You can even declare as hollow, you don't even need to at this point. And shuffle. So you have 2 cards in deck, you're going to hit Mick. The moment usually your opponent assumes, if they don't really know Nightrose, that you're basically not gonna attack the Vanguard. That's where they're wrong. Haha! So what you're gonna do here is that since this is the heavier bone, we're gonna use this. We're gonna attack with this column first. So we're gonna attack with this first. This is gonna be 19 to the Vanguard. That's one attack. Attack 1. This is gonna be 19, 16 plus 30. This is gonna be 46 to his Vanguard, because 20k they'll give plus 10k plus 10k here, so it's plus 30, 16 plus 30, 46. End of battle. Counterblast 1, bottom deck. Countercharge 1. Next. Here, my favorite thing to do here is actually to call Night Storm. Assuming there are 5 damage, it's gonna be really hell. So that was 2 attacks. Second attack, 11k. Since this is hollowed, I use this skill, Counterblast 1. Superior Call, Lazy. Declare Lazy as hollow. Bottom deck 1. Now you have 4 cards in deck and you're guaranteed to hit a stand. Countercharge 1. Counterblast 1 for Lazy skill. Soul Blast 1. Next, what you do here is, from here, I would actually ideally call Ocean Depth, Zombie Whale. That was attack number 3. Next, we're gonna move on to attack number 4. Ocean Depth Zombie Whale. This is another 20k shield. So I'm assuming since this is gonna be a 20k shield, this is about 28. This is gonna be about 28k. This is usually where his power spike is at. It's gonna be about 20k shield. So that's attack 4. Attack 5. Since this bonus has a plus 10k, this is gonna be 28. End of battle. One skill. Declaring Night Storm as hollow. That was attack 5. Attack 6. 1, 2, 3. Hits 1. Restand. Plus 5k to Storm. Attack 7. 16. Boom. Attack 8. Steroids. Declaring hollow. Skill. Declaring hollow. So you can get at least 10 attacks here. And the funny thing is, you can even cheese this out in another variant of this combo. So, assuming, right, that you had one more card left that you had okay, assuming you had 2 cards left in deck, and you had 2 cards left. Yeah, so you had 2 cards left in deck after your drive check, and you had your only 2 cards left were Bale. What you can do actually is that you can call from a Night Storm skill, you can call a King Serpent here to soul charge the Bale, so that when you call Lazy, you soul blast the Bale and you call the Bale in front of a bone, therefore make another free call. That's basically another variant of this, which I'm not gonna go over, but you can just see how this a 10 attack GB8 is pretty cheesy in of itself, especially since you can turbo this quite effectively, and this is a really good turbo if you're gonna triple G guard right off the bat. So this is just one variant of the Galleon. There's more variants of this, but just for the sake of time, this is my favorite combo with Galleon. Around 10 attacks. Most of the only a couple of attacks are 11k really, and the rest are 10 are usually between 10k to 15k shields. Really good GB8. And finally, the next stride we're actually gonna talk about, which is I'm excited for, is Megiddo. So for this part of the video, I'm gonna show you one of my interpretations of an ideal Megiddo stride as Nightrose. We can use Megiddo essentially for free. However, I strongly suggest you do not zero stride unless your opponent is at 4 damage and you have at least 2 to 3 copies of your bone and at least 1 copy of each of your key cards in your drop zone, just to ensure maximum potency. And your deck is like you have at least 10 cards in your deck and you still have some triggers remaining, because Megiddo is a game ender, and the moment you stride this, you have to end that turn, or basically you have to make sure you cripple your opponent to the point that they can't even stride, or when they do stride you can block it so they can use vanilla swing at their faces. So without further ado, let's get on with this. So you're only gonna need these are your starting 5 units, so we're gonna start with a ZR stride. Ultimate Strike. Megiddo. Megiddo skill. Counterblasting 2. We're gonna call these units in this order. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5. These 2 are hollowed. I'll get plus 5k in the concentration abilities. Skill. Soul Charge 2. Counter Charge 2. So, no cost. Alright, so this is when we're gonna start the battles. So we're gonna do attack 1, 13. This is why it's ideal to have 5 damage. Attack 2, 13. Switch. It's a mandatory switch, so switch with caution. Attack 3. So 5k, 5k, attack 3 is gonna be for 28, so 20k. It's really detrimental if you're against a control deck, so try not to Megiddo if the control deck has a Denal Griffin or a Karina. It just really... So this is a really situational strat, but continuing on, this is what it is. So that was attack 3. So this is the interesting thing though. So since they switched, I'll choose to use Nightstorm skill first to counterblast 1. Next, oh sorry, no, this should not have been flipped. So that was the first 3 attacks. Next I would have used Nightstorm skill to counterblast 1. Next, since even though it moved, the original boosted unit is still on board, I'll have to resolve Negrobone's skill. So I would retire Nightstorm even though he's in a different circle. Since the original boosted unit is still present on the board, I have to retire it. Therefore I can target it again to call it over. And Nightstorm is now hollowed. All I do is counter charge 1. That was the first 3 attacks. Attack 4, 11, skill. Call. Next. Skill. Next, I would go for this one next. Boom. Yep. I'll attack 4. Attack 5. Switch. Attack 6. I'll call any beatstick, I'll call her because she's 11k base. So 6 attacks, you have 3 more to go. And you drive check. You'll trigger. So that's a bit of a plus. So you win. So you can basically egg out 9 attacks. That's basically my division of a really ideal Megiddo turn, because you can still dish out a good number of attacks while manipulating and abusing the concentration abilities. This is a very situational card, however, it's such a good card in those situations when you have the resources, you have the soul, but you don't have enough soul, but you have the counterblast, and you just need to close out the game. Next is piloting advice. So in this section of the video, I will be teaching you how to pilot Nightrose through certain matchups, as well as how to better improve your plays against these certain matchups. Of course, whatever I say may not always align with what you believe, so take it with a grain of salt, as well as this is also my opinion, so feel free to leave those kinds of critique out the window. Thank you. So in this matchup, in this specific scenario, this is mostly the first matchup, which is the most relevant right now, is Link Joker. Mostly Chaos Breaker. Messiah is he's basically playing solitaire with himself until either you can kill him or he can kill you. Basically with Messiahs, it's not as bad because with Messiahs they can force call any units unlike Chaos can. And with Messiahs, really the only thing you really have to be careful of is their Harmonix Neo, but they have to rely on their own field. So with Messiah, your key cards are basically Cannoneer, Pocker, Dragut, and Negronoras. The reason being is because Harmonix Neo can't stop Superior Perfect Guardian from drop zone. Basically, that's the TLDR version of Messiahs. Just make sure you don't leave any board, and if you do, make sure it's a strategistic play. other than that, let's continue on, and this is mostly for against Chaos. So against Chaos, so these are all your key cards that you're gonna need, or you will eventually use against Chaos. Dragut, obvious reasons, is to wipe out their board. Chaos is a deck that heavily relies on control, so you basically have to out-control and not outrush, but it's like you have to out-control and outwit them to win. It's a highly skill-based matchup. Dragut is also here because you want to ramp, as well as you want to make your board disappear as well, so that Chaos has no targets. Obadiah is here because Obadiah is almost certainly your first strat unless you draw into Pocker right off the bat. You want to get Pocker out of your deck as fast as you can, or if you draw Head Start Zombie, but then again I would still Obadiah just to get Pocker and just to get these three out of the deck as fast as possible. So Breeze is also here because if for some reason you cannot hit heals, which is why the heal is here, because heals like the G guards, these two G guards are your main Kree Elemental targets for Pucker. So if you didn't draw into heals after your first try with Obadiah, if you didn't draw into heals naturally when you Obadiah, or your first strike Gouache, generally you want to first strike Gouache if you draw into Pucker, or if you know you can just ramp to the point where you just can net hand. You only want to Obadiah against Chaosbreaker if you can at least draw 3 outside of your drive check, so you net 6 basically during that turn. So the reason here is that you can basically just vanilla start Sabreeze just to get the Kree Elemental face up so that you can effectively use Pucker right after. That's basically why Sabreeze is here. These two Kree Elemental G-Guards targets for Pucker. Heal to flip these. That's basically why this is here. Heals are important to draw into. If you don't draw into them, then you're gonna have to play a little weirdly, and it's gonna be a little slower. Crits are here just for ramp. And really, these crits this one serves as more of a stability-wise, and he can't Karina this. This one he can't, the Chaosbreaker can Karina, but it provides more like bait for the Karina, I'd say. And Nightstorm, because what's funny about Karina is that if they have board right, and you couldn't control their board, you can use Nightstorms on attack at the end of battle to call Pocker, to then unlock the back row, which is detrimental to the Chaos player, because if you had like a bone in the back row and it boosted, but then it was locked, when you call Pucker, that bone's is unlocked as stand. Therefore, that's why Nightstorm is here. So with all the key units aside, the main things you really want to focus against this matchup is really what you lock from your hand, because the main units that really hurt in Chaos are Chaos Universe. There's going to be an image right here for all the cards I'm going to mention. It's going to be Chaos Universe, Deluge, and their Grade 2 and their Grade 2 lineup. Basically, they have 3 units in their Grade 2 lineup that can call from hand, deck, from your deck or your drop zone. Those are the ones that are most crippling to Nightrose, and that is why Pocker is always adamantly in the deck in the current meta. It'll be somewhere here where the 3 cards are, because I can't remember the name right off the bat. But in general, what you want to do is you want to keep your board empty. And if you are forced to call from your hand, like with Deluge or with Universe, you call smart. Basically what this means is that if you're going to call a unit, call something that you can retire at the end of turn. Basically, if it's a hollow unit, right, and you have Seawall in hand, you have Seawall in hand, then it's easy to unlock that unit with Pocker, then use Seawall to haul that unit, so it'll just naturally exit the field on its own. Otherwise, you're gonna have to use GB2 and a unit that you haul during your turn to revive it on top of the newly unlocked unit to then retire the unlocked unit on top of to retire the unlocked unit. Basically, you don't want to have a board for Chaos to mess with you with. Regarding Karina, which is basically their back row lock, don't be afraid of it, because you have the Pocker, and really it only hurts you if you don't know how to play against it. You just have to pay attention to what your opponent drive checks. Although you can't really control what they draw, you can at least be smart about you can make smart assumptions. Basically, if you have not seen a heal and it's their second strike, there's probably one in their hand guaranteed. Therefore, if you're gonna do a Gouache turn and you're gonna call out Rampage Shades, to swing with your Vanguard first to avoid being locked in the back row and to net as much hand as you can. That's why you have Nightstorm and Pocker, so that you can bait the Karina. So they think they're controlling your back row, but in reality, they're helping you by respanding your back row. though be it with less power. What's more is that with Link Joker, the only thing you really have to focus on is that it's more of a grind game now, instead of the fact that sure you can try and end them early, but that means that if you fail, that they're probably gonna have more control over you than you over them. Mainly, what I want to emphasize with Link Joker is that they're just a control deck, so they're not overly broken if you're smart and you know how to play against it and just to remain calm. These are the main units that you really want to see. So these units you really want to see. These units you want to see in drop, this unit you want to see in hand, and these units and these units you want to see face up in the G zone. Even just this, just for the Cray Elemental target. Regarding anything further than Chaos Breaker, and the reason why you want to keep your board empty is to avoid getting blue ball or glue ball, whatever the name is. I can't remember it correctly, but it's to avoid being masked, permanently locked, and depending on what Chaos Grade 3 they're on, will also change your playstyle. If they're in the new Chaos Grade 3, you don't have to worry, because if Pocker unlocks a unit, they'll only get to draw 1, which is okay because they're basically. The reason why the new Chaos Grade 3 is good is because they can selectively snipe, which is why Destiny Guardian is basically a pseudo denial Griffin. They can only use it once, it's a pseudo once per turn, but at the same time they get to retire 1 and draw 1, which is still not that bad. So just be careful which Chaos are. If they're in the old one, you're safe during your battle phase, so therefore you can use Nightstorm Pocker without any repercussions, because Chaos cannot retire your back row that was just recently unlocked. If he was in a new Chaos, you have to be a little bit smarter of what you lock from your hand, as well as what you choose to put in the damage zone for Deluge. Because if you call, let's say, a non-holo unit like a Tommy the Ghosty Brother, your Strike Fighter, onto the field due to because it was the best option or whatever, due to Deluge's skill due to Chaos Universe, you have to be smart enough to realize that as well. As soon as you unlock it, they can draw, and that if you have another key unit locked, they won't want that to leave the field because it's a non-holo unit, therefore making you work more to get that out of the field. So basically, be smart about what you put in the field, and also think ahead if you can get it out of the field, and more so if the chaos opponent can really plus from that. Because during your turn, they can only, on the new Chaos Breaker Crisis, they can only +1, and the old Chaos Breaker can only trigger during end phase. So they can snipe out 1 but only +1, and then you're sealing his skill for the rest of the turn. So if you put that all into retrospect, Chaos is not intimidating. You just have to pace yourself and make sure that you're paying attention to what the Chaos player has in play, and make smart assumptions of what they have in hand. Though aside from the cards that force lock, other than that, Chaos player is basically just another Link Joker deck that cannot really touch Nightrose, in a sense, because aside from Deluge, Universe, and the drop zone and deck colors, that's really the only thing that can really mess us up. And as long as you call properly and you know how to manipulate your board to the point that you know which cards can stay on board and which cards have to exit, and how you can make them exit the field while also netting your hand. So basically, if I have 3 lock cards, right, for some reason, and I strike skill call Pucker, unlock those 3, and then I'm on Gouache. If I had a surplus of soul, because I was smart in the previous turn to build my soul, I can soul blast it, call crits over those units, then soul charge the crits so that they're out of the board, and I'm just netting hand. Therefore, my opponent has no target for Deluge, and if I want to go offense, I can just focus on has no targets for Karina. And if I want to go offense, I can just focus on units like Nightstorm on battle phase, and I can just use a card from my hand to call him from drop zone just to get a few attacks in. At the end of the turn, I can use Gouache to just mill. Another key fact is that if Gouache is hollowed and you know your opponent has a heal hand, don't keep Gouache in the back row. I know it may sound weird, but I'd rather have Lazy be locked by Karina than Gouache. Keep in mind that Karina is also, they have to lock rear guards to lock your back row, and you're choosing. So basically, if you can control their field, meaning retire it with the use of Cannoneer, which is another key card. I didn't include it here because this is mainly how to counter Link Joker, but Cannoneer is your next pseudo control. If you can control their board, retiring their unit while plussing, you're basically reducing the amount of power they have on you during your turn. If during your turn, you can retire their board to the point where they only have 2 units, and you have 3 units in the back row. You don't have to worry about Grenache being locked. But make sure Grenache is never ever locked unless you can unlock him immediately after, during your turn, during your next turn, and you can make him exit the field as hollowed. Because it's one thing for Grenache to exit the field and your opponent plussing 1, but it's another for Grenache to exit the field as hollow without your opponent plussing 1. You get to refund costs because Grenache is your main counter-charging engine, and if you lose it, it's kind of hard to recover from that. Not saying it's not impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's hard to recover from a lot of usage because Nightrose is a counterblast heavy deck in a sense, but Grenache almost makes it negligible. So just be smart about what you lock, and if key units are locked due to your misplay because you kept them in the back row and you forgot it and you totally neglected the fact that your opponent drew check a heal, then that's on you, and you have to find a way to get them out of the board and to still plus yourself to the point, or at least equalize it to the point where you're not minusing at all during that turn. It's okay to minus against Chaos, but control how much you minus and control how much you plus. Basically, the only thing I can tell you when it comes to Chaos and Link Joker in general is that you just have to be smart about what they can lock. Basically, if you're being forced to call stuff as locked, call units that can easily be hollowed, even call crits. Calling crits is the best thing you can do, because if they deluge and you call 2 crits and you can Pucker and Soul Blast and unlock those, you can Soul Charge those 2 crits and +2. Basically, what they did is they just accelerated part of your process. And what's good about Pucker too is that try and call units. Sometimes you actually want to leave a unit locked per se, because the reason is, example is, let's say I had 3 units locked, correct? At the beginning of my turn, I use Pucker to unlock 2. I call Lazy over Pucker to recall Pucker. Basically, I'm using 3 soul, but at the same time, if I'm on Dragut, I have 5 units on board, and that means that basically for Counterblast of 4 during that turn, I can effectively retire their board, thus giving me control. And since they have no rear guards, I don't have to worry about Karina anymore, and I can just go I can just attack normally. At the end of the turn, if you do a combo I told you earlier, where you have Screaming Banshee, Grenache, Cannoneer, or Screaming Banshee, because you already used 4, Cannoneer, Screaming Banshee, Grenache, and a Maltreat. At the end of turn, for a mill 3, you can counter charge 5 because Maltreat goes upon the deck, and you can net 1 from the current Cannoneer and 2 from the Screaming Banshees, and you're gonna refund the cost of Dragut, because in Link Joker there's almost no resist. I'm pretty sure there's no resist units to my current knowledge, so therefore you can 100% retire their board. Therefore you yourself are in control of the game, because Link Joker, you still have to draw into their key units. They're basically another deck like Aquaforce, where for them to have power, well, to have increasingly more control and power over you, they need to draw into their units, and it still costs them to call units because they have to use units from their hand to replenish the ones that they lost. And if they don't have another copy of those units, then that means that you basically just egg them. The reason why Chaos seems so daunting is because what most people don't realize, because when they have those units locked, they're wondering, how is the Chaos player still having so much hand? The reason why the Chaos player is having so much hand is because he's not having to waste resources to refuel his board. But if you give him the challenge to having to refuel his board, you're making him lose hand, because in reality Chaos can't plus as much. They can only plus a maximum of, I believe, 5 cards in a turn, that's including drive check, assuming they hit draw triggers, because some run draw triggers now. And even with that, that's only 5 cards where you can net more, and effectively you can even control more. So don't be scared of Chaos, because you still have a pretty good win rate. I'd say against Chaos currently, depending on the player, you still have a 50-50 chance of winning, because it's still a skill-based matchup. So this is the main cards you want to use, and just my thoughts on how you should play against Chaos. The next matchup we're going to talk about will be Vanquisher. So in this part of the video, this is how to play against Vanquisher. So as you can see, this is much more cluttered than the last one, but that's because I'm emphasizing that you're gonna need your grade 2s just in general and your grade 1s just in general for the matchup against Vanquisher. The main reasons why I have this is because you want to focus on early game. The reason that you want to focus on early game aside, well, not aside, but like you want to focus on early game and not really focus on early game guarding, because if you guard early game and play conservative, you're actually gonna lose more likely than you are if you were to go aggro. So against Vanquisher, you have to go aggro. The reason being is that if you early game guard, regardless if you're going first or second, Hard Rod can just mercilessly target your drop zone. Let's say you're grade 2, you guard, let's say your opponent went first, you're grade 2, and you just guard it with like a Negrolily, and your opponent can just rest Hard Rod and just retire and just bind that right away. You want to give them less of an ability to trip Thunderstruck before GB. The reason why you want a front row especially, and I know most people will say don't you get a front row, but I will suggest in grade 2 and grade 1 provide a front row. The reason what is because they're going to target your front row more, and even if your front row goes to the drop zone, they're going to have to waste attacks, meaning that you wouldn't have to waste time guarding. They're just going to target your front row so that they can bind those rearguards. If they see like a lazy in the front row, they're going to want to attack that so that they can bind it their next turn. However, if you are going second right, and then you are to deploy your units on grade 2, that means that on your opponent's grade 3 turn, they're going to have to focus more on your rearguard so that they're actually going to have units to bind and retire aside from your vanguard, unless they just focus your vanguard, which is okay too. You really don't want to guard early, you just want to just deal as much damage because Vanquisher is still a GB heavy deck, meaning that they don't really want to discard their units to guard. A lot of their units are GB reliant as well as Thunderstrike reliant. So you just have to get practicing with Vanquisher so that you know which units are which Thunderstrike requirement. At the end of this this portion, I'm going to show you some units and like what are their Thunderstrike requirements so that you just have a general idea. So I'm just going to go over what you should do against Vanquisher right now and what's your best chances. Regarding Gouache, you want to keep Gouache in your soul unless you really need the boost for the aggro. You never want him in the board because he's a susceptible target, and even if he is in soul, you are sacrificing a little bit of early game aggro so that you're adding to your soul count, meaning that your Gouache is that much more effective on first stride if you so need. The reason why I'm putting heals is because the same reason why I have the GB8 here. You want to get the GB8 before they can. The moment they hit GB8, it's almost game unless you have a massive 10 plus card hand, and during your next turn, you have to discard your entire hand so that you can make a pseudo drop zone just to end the game. Megiddo is here because again, trying to close that game early, and even if they Thunderstrike you, you just have to pay attention to their heals because you have to pay attention to how many G-guards they have face up and how many heals they have in hand because two of the 5 selection G-guard will fuck over Megiddo, sorry, pardon language, will screw over Megiddo and will essentially make you lose the game because you only Megiddo if you know you're gonna win because non-GB Nightrose sucks butts. And Dragut's here because you really want to play the board control game, especially because you want to retire their Hard Rod as fast as possible. The reason why you want to have an early game front row, early board front row, is because they're going to be focused on putting rearguards in your drop so that they can bind it right away. So if you can bait them with this, if you have multiple copies of the card, you're basically negating how much damage you're going to get early game, as well as you're forcing them to really target rearguards to make Hard Rod viable. That's the only reason. Because with the Vanquisher, you want to get like the limiter out. Don't be scared because they're gonna get Thunderstrike regardless. You wanna make them work for the Thunderstrike is what I'm saying. They're still gonna get pretty sure Thunderstrike 3 or 4 by the end of first stride, just from simply the stride skill and from V-Buster if they so choose. But what I want you guys to realize is that you just have to play as you would and not pay mind to the Thunderstrike because almost all of Vanquisher's Thunderstrike abilities you are picking unless it's Chatura or the on-hit Vanquisher stride. After your first stride, you should have GB2, which means you can use your GB. You should have GB2, means you can use Nightrose GB2. After that, you should not have to worry about hitting your key cards because you mainly want to bind your Forerunner, your triggers, or if really necessary, you want to bind at least just one copy of your card that you have multiple copies of, like Laser Cannon. You can function with only 2 in deck and only 2 in drop. You can definitely function with that, and you really just want to bind your Persona copies of Nightrose because there's a low chance you're gonna go into the Xerath Dragon. Lily is here because Your defensive combos are still good, but you want to limit to how much you can use your GB2 in one game. I'd suggest you want to limit your GB2 usage to 3 to 4 in total, including the defensive mills at end of turn during your opponent's phase. The reason I'm saying this is because on the off chance that they can turbo GB8, and they can turbo GB8 just as well as you are, depending on just who top stacks heals, is that if you're low on deck, let's say you have 10 cards left in deck and you milled all your key units and they can closure you before you can Galleon them, you lost all your key units because they're in their drop zone. So you wanna restrict your milling and only mill when you need to. If you have at least 15 to 20 cards in deck by that and they GB8 you and you have a 15 card hand, you basically just avoided a really strong closure dragon, and you can close out the game next turn because you have a high chance of surviving. Because they do run stance, however, in my opinion, you can survive that really easily with a Negrolily, PGs, and just luck and low damage. Basically, the low damage comes with the aggro because they're gonna focus more on riggers, assumingly. Most players will really focus on riggers just so they can bind it. If they don't focus on riggers, then you have high damage, it's okay. That means that that just means that you're gonna have to play a more aggro and up-tempo playstyle, that's about it. And if they don't focus your riggers, you have front row to stick their faces with, so that's still pretty good. Gouache is here because you still want to do the original intent, which was to plus your hand to the point where you have a lot of hand and you want to control their board. The Gouache allows you to plus and allows you to call units like Serpent to control your board. Crits are here, obvious reasons for plussing, and Sabreeze is here because Sabreeze is a trap against this matchup, because the moment you Sabreeze, you have to have at least 3 damage to do anything. And I suggest to only, and I mean really, only Sabreeze if you can no longer play the grade 2 game, or you have 3 damage and you have a Screaming Banshee in hand. The reason I'm saying this is because you want to fight for first stride as much as possible. The moment they have first stride, you're basically almost crippled in that sense, because they have access to V-Buster right off the bat. So if you have a mediocre drop zone like with 5 units, those are all gone. And if Gouache is one of them, those are all gone. And really, them holding back a turn doesn't mean anything. And for you, Sabreezing should only be an option if you are forced to ride grade 3 because your grade 2 game is no longer relevant, viable, or is no longer attainable, as well as you have the means to plus by using Sabreeze with a counterblast of 2, as well as that, and solely from Nightrose's stride skill, you can make a board, or just solely from Nightrose's stride skill, you can revive a Cannoneer and retire their hard rod. So with 4 counterblast, you can do this. And then at the end of turn, if you have Gouache on board, you can use Screaming to hollow Gouache. But the problem is Gouache is in your soul. That's why Sabreeze is kind of a trap right now. So this is when you have to consider ahead of time, like when you're initially riding grade 1, if you want Gouache out into the field or not. If in your hand you only see a grade 1, 2, and 3, and like I'd say 2 triggers or at least one other grade 1, that's when you might want to put Gouache out onto the field. Because if you see grade 1 and like a bunch of grade 2s and a grade 3, even if you don't see a grade 3, as long as you see majority grade 1s and 2s, you can do an early game rush. If you don't see that, you see triggers but you see a ride chain, then you may want to call a Gouache so you can get that offense and you can make full use of Sabreeze if they decide to grade 2 game you. That's why Vanquisher wants a grade 2 game you, because they have a solid grade 2 game like you do. However, I would argue that your grade 2 game is much more of a threat, because if they are forced to ride and you get first stride, that means that they only maximize hard rod to 0 extent. Because usually if you have a front row, they're gonna focus it, and most they're gonna get is Thunder Strike 1 or 2 because they're focusing the rear guards. And even then, if you have first strike, you can just open out, you can Gouache, so you can ramp your hand, or you can fill out your drops to the point where you don't even have to worry about hitting your key units anymore, because you can just pick triggers, you can pick strike out, you can pick grade 3s that are not relevant. You can just avoid picking it altogether. That's why Pican's also here, because there are some resistors and Vanquishers to my knowledge, and more board control means you can manipulate them further. Vanquisher has the same problem as Link Joker, where they have to rely on units to get heavier Thunder Strike, and really but the good thing about Vanquisher is that they can beef up their front row. They can beef up any unit in their front row. However, the units that are really you have to retire are Jatura, Helene, and any units that are really not one and done, and that can that are either on hit or have a relevance in their late game. Basically, you want to focus on retiring their grade 2s and their grade 1s. Don't worry about your Thunderstrike because you're gonna get Thunderstrike anyway. But problem is, like, they're more relevant after their second stride, because that's when their Thunderstrike reaches about 8. If they are smart and they are really lucky, their Thunderstrike can reach between 8 to 10, and that means that the moment that they use the one Vanquisher stride, where the GB3 is the front row gets 3k for every single face up in the bind zone, that's when it becomes a problem. So you kind of see where the early game aggro has to be here. The reason I didn't put Negrosonger here is because even though it's still a viable card, I just don't use it as often because it eggs my hand too much, and it's a situational game ender. So people will argue to put Negrosonger in, and I do agree with them that Negrosonger is a good card. However, I don't feel like he's as reliable as these other units because he eggs your hand, and the problem is that egging hand against Vanquisher is really not a good idea, and only use him if you know you can close out the game. Though, and the reason why Negrosonger is for me is kind of iffy is because if they have the Fire Selection G guard, that shield can basically screw up your board. And what I suggest is that if they have the Fire Selection G guard, make sure to have a full field so that you can avoid binding your units. The reason why is because the most they can do is 2 Fire Selection G guard. The most they can do is retire 2 and bind 2 during your field. So you still have 1 access to 1 unit, and if you have 5 total units, you can still, and the last remaining unit is a Night Storm, you can still combo off that 1 unit. That's what I'm saying. But be careful, the moment you see 2 of those Fire Selection G guards hit their Guardian Circle, you have to be prepared for their next turn, because it's almost a guarantee that they will either GB8 or they will either GB8 if 1 more G Guardian hits that G Guardian Circle if they had first stride, or they will have a really good they will just use next turn to really just abuse you, because they up their Thunderstrike number by 2 during your turn. So you just have to be really careful about that. What's also relevant here is because using the Negrolily GB2 combo is not as easy anymore, because you retire and bind from your field a lot, so you don't want to have board for obvious reasons. Therefore, Negrolily is not really a reliable option. That's why I put her here, because she's not a reliable option. However, there are times where she is available, and that's only available if they have their first stride. Because the Vanquisher's first stride, in my opinion, is when they're weakest at Thunderstrike, because their stride skill retires 1 from your field, and their stride can assumingly retire another 1 from your field. So when you have 3 units on board, you can use Negrolily effectively if you just want the extra shield. That's the only reason why she's here, in my current opinion right now. And other than that, you just have to really outwit the Vanquisher player, because it's whoever can top deck the best units, as well as what can you do with the most units you have right now while restricting yourself, because in the early game your point is to have no restrictions and to just all out rush them and try to get them to high damage, like regardless of what your field is. But as soon as you stride, you have to change it so that you're restricting yourself to maximum of 4 GB2s with Nightrose the entire game. And you want to slow down your selective milling, because you don't want to mill key units, you want to draw them so that they're in your hand. And to close off this part of the video, what I want to say is that when you're guarding, guard smart, meaning that if you see, for example, you have 2 bones in your hand, keep 1 in hand. If you think your opponent can hit GB8 really quick. The reason is, it should be almost obvious. Like, the moment Vanquisher has a decent draw engine, the only problem is though, it's really obvious. The moment they hit 1 heal during drive check, you know they have 1 heal, so they're gonna use the Fire Selection G guard once. And if that were to happen, then that means that you can safely assume that they're gonna have another one in heal in the G zone, because if they don't G guard and they just guard it, you can assume that they only have 1 heal, and they'll only use that to really get rid of to really just mess up your board and get rid of your key units. However, if you see them drive check a heal during your turn when you're not really as aggro and you're just trying to build hand, that you're not seeing them drop the Fire Selection G guard, that means they're holding on to it until the next turn, so that in the hopes that they're gonna get another heal trigger, they can hit GB8, and then turn after that they can GB8 you. So you want to just guard smart as much as humanly possible, and as much as the game will let you. and to really minimize your damage. Minimizing your damage is really easy because early game, like I said before, if you dish out a front row, they're more inclined to target it, especially if it's units like Lazy or Serpent, because they want to bind it, because those are the key cards you want to bind zone. So they're more likely to hit it so that they can retire with Hard Rod pre-GB. However, even if they just focus your face, that's okay, because you can just hit them right back. The good thing about Nightrose is that we don't really care how many units we drop on board, because assumingly the units that are retired on board we can reuse again. Vanquisher doesn't have really that luxury because some of their units are on place. Like Fatina, on place, Thunderstrike, Soul Blast 1, Thunderstrike 2, Soul Blast 1 draw. That's one of their grade 1s. So that is why I feel like you should just abuse the fact that the Nightrose can revive units from drop zone, and that you should just capitalize on your early game and hope that he doesn't crit sack you, and more so that you have to play mind games to sort of like bait out your opponent's units. You have to control the game, you have to outwit your opponent, and most importantly, you have to control yourself. Because you're not just controlling your opponent, you have to control yourself at Nightrose. Because with most other matchups, no other matches can really touch our drop zone. Chaos can only do it, but we get to choose what we call on board. They don't really make our drop zone disappear because we get them back. So the main point to get out of this video is control yourself, control your opponent, most importantly, ramp your hand, and guard smartly. Those are the 4 things I really want you to take from this. So in the next part of the video, I'll be talking about Overlord, post GBT 13 of course. So with the arrival of the Purge and the Destiny, Overlord has changed its tempo. Instead of a control deck, it's more of an hybrid control and aggro deck. So right off the bat, what I want to say with the Overlord is that you have to keep your damage low, meaning mid to late and even early to mid game, you want to keep your damage low. So on the second and third stride, you want your damage to be 2 to 3. The reason is so that the Purge does not get multiple drive checks. If your damage is at 3, he stays at his generation break 3 is that he drive checks for every single card in our damage zone. So therefore, if your damage is at 3, they're gonna use the skill once to get you at 4 to get quadra. If your damage is at 2, they're just gonna use the skill to persona flip itself and to just give you 3 damage so that they can get triple drive. So essentially, if you're at 2 damage, it's almost not worth for them to go into the Purge at times. So what you want to do is keep yourself at low damage so that they'll have to G-flip the Purge. Because ideally what Overlord wants to keep is for you to have 4 to 5 damage that after first stride they can use the Purge on you 3 strides in a row, or even 4 if for some reason you're at 4 damage prior to striding. Not even prior to striding, sorry, after their first stride, and they can just somehow purge you and they have GB3 right off the bat. So really, what I would say is keep your damage low early to mid game, as well as try and control it late game too, because remember, they can auto deal your damage that nullifies triggers. Damn, Purgatory Dragons, damn! Well, aside from that, so when it comes to key units, we obviously have the crits here. The crits are here because you want to ramp early game and just to build your hand size. Cannoneer is here because you still want to do board control. You mainly want to target all the units in their front row, such as Nehalem, I think the name was Burning Horn from the new set, as well as you want, if at all applicable, like if the Overlord player runs that unit, to target the grade 1 that is basically a free stride during the Overlord's stride phase by just retiring it. You want to retire that right away, and if for some reason they have the grade 1 Conroe that lets them countercharge, retire that right away too, so that they cannot use that card to countercharge anymore. The PGs are here because you wanna, of course, perfect guard the Purge and any resetting Vanguards that they have. Seawall Banshee again is the good card because it's recyclable, and Gust Jin because of the superior PG combo. Obadiah is here for a unique reason, because I would argue that Overlord's first stride has to be by far its weakest, in my opinion, because it doesn't assuming it doesn't have any prior GB, meaning they didn't G guard, they have to, but they're based on the first stride is basically just a normal stride. normal being is just an on-attack blaze unit, like the new rare from this set. I forgot the name. Obadiah is here just so that you can set up your drop zone with the crits. And yes, milling crits in Obadiah is a strategy. You are losing crit pressure, but you can gain hand. People, it's a strategy to mill crits, and I know it tilts you, but I love doing it. King Serpent is here for obvious reasons. Free Cull and Soul. Lazy's here because combo maker, and you wanna go semi aggro with this deck. So you wanna get out a lot of attack, get out as much attacks as you possibly can in one turn, while also retaining your hand and doing pseudo board control. Hence why Lazy's here. Songer's here actually because early game is your strongest against Overlord. So if you can somehow end it in your first, second, or third stride, you can. And Negrosonger is here because even if you egg your hand 1 in this scenario, you are pushing Overlord damage, which is really good. Because until they hit the purge, they're not gonna get a lot of. They're gonna get only the bare minimum of drive checks every turn, meaning 3 from just a regular stride. Aside from that, I don't believe they have a massive and reliable draw engine. And even if they do the one cheesy combo with the ace, where if they have 4 damage, they can counterblast 4 and G flip 2 aces to instantly get a restand and GB3. That's personally a gimmicky play because they're using a lot of resources to attain that, and they need to emphasize they need to have an Overlord in hand and a Conroe on field to refund that cost. On the off chance that you are facing a deck that runs that gimmick, in the first game, if you're playing a best of 3, in the first game you should see that, and then in your second game you should keep them at 3 damage on their first try to basically avoid the possibility of that even happening. And Dragut's here because you want to field control. Again, as I said earlier, field controlling Overlord is also the best thing you can do aside from aggro, because with you don't really need to aggro Overlord to see it weaken, in my opinion. You can just field control while also just dishing out a regular 3 attacks or 4 attacks if you hit a stand trigger, and that's why Dragut is here. Megiddo is here because you can close out games early with Megiddo, and I feel like after playtesting with him on CFA that Megiddo does come in handy, but it's still a gimmick because Overlord has access to Denial Griffin and Advanced Guard, and especially Defeat Flare. So if you are going Megiddo, pay attention to your opponent's hand, how many heal triggers they have, what they have face up in the damage zone, and do not attack with your Vanguard first. Attack with it last after Rearguards are done attacking, so that you can save your back row. And Bone is here because another combo maker. Heals are here because you want a G-Guard to get GB8 as fast as possible. Well, not really GB8 as fast as possible. GB8 here is basically, this is the normal game. It's just more of a grind game, and it's more of a mentally taxing game in a sense, because you have to pay attention to your opponent just as much as to pay attention to yourself. And the problem with this is that, like, you can just control your opponent, but the problem is whatever your opponent does is based on them. And with Overlord, it may feel like it's a linear play, but at the same time, don't get into that habit, because Overlord has a lot of access to good strike units such as Ziegenberg, the Ace, and the Purge. Those are 3 units you want to watch out for. And honestly, the fact that they have 3 restanding options is pretty terrifying in of itself. And even if they don't have Ziegenberg, 2 restanding options because the Purge is not restanding. But the fact that they have the Ace, which is a restanding option when they can easily fetch an Overlord to hand, is still good. But a lot of people run the Ace other than the gimmick, and the Purge is a late game at Pentadrive. So really, not a lot of decks can survive 2 consecutive Pentadrive checks, and this is where Overlord gets its main hand power. Overlord is not much of a control deck anymore, and since we are Nightrose, we can still play around with what Overlord can do. So because the Overlord, it doesn't really retire as much anymore, so it's less of a control deck. So what you can do is at the end of your turn, you can just leave Lazy remaining in the front row. Yes, it'll be easier for them to chip Blaze with Ziegenberg, but at the same time, they'll help you retire Lazy, which will then set up a combo if you have Mick in the drop zone. If you have Mick in the drop zone, oh boy, you're a Totem K base. Or if you have Cannoneer in the drop zone, oh boy, you just denial chicken one of their units before they even got a chance to attack. So basically, that's why all these units are here. And I have Seabreeze in here because you have to be careful with Seabreeze in this match, because Overlord does have basically a Grenache like us, which is Conroe, but it's based on the number of attacks they do. And again, playing in a grade 2 game with Overlord is not as bad as with other decks. So you can play a grade 2 game, but be cautious with Sabreeze, and only Sabreeze if it nets you more than just 3 drive check can get you at least 3 attacks in that turn, meaning you early game rush, or you have a board right now and you're not egging hand, and you can at the end of turn refund at least 2 counter blasts from Sabreeze's skill. And remember, the key point to take away from this is to keep your damage low between 2 to 3 early to mid game. I'd say aside from first stride, if they don't have GB first stride, if they don't have GB1 by first stride, meaning that at the end of their first stride they'll only have GB2. Sorry, poor wording there. From early to mid game, just keep your damage at 2 to 3, because the moment that they have GB3, they're mostly gonna go into the purge for most of it, because they're gonna have. If you have 2 damage, they're mostly gonna go into Ziegenberg. If you have 3, they're mostly gonna go into the purge. You have to choose between a quad drive or a restanding Vanguard. Ziegenberg is good against Nightrose because we generally only have 1 unit, and at the same time we can actually avoid Ziegenberg altogether if we can manipulate our fields properly. So at the end of your turn, the best way you can probably negate Ziegenberg, or probably the best way you can even bait out a Ziegenberg, is if your opponent is at, let's say, their next stride they have GB3 active, but you're only at 2 to 3 damage. Your opponent has to decide whether he wants the quad drive or the restand, which is again another quad drive, but you get the pressure of another attack. So what you can do is that you can have, at least if you're doing it properly in your board controlling, your opponent should have only 2 to 0 rear guards onto the field. Ideally, you want them to have none. So at the end of your turn, you can have only Lazy and Cannoneer, and for your opponent to trip Blaze, they're gonna have to either drop 3 cards or retire one of your units, which is either Cannoneer or Negrolily. In this case, if they have no rear guards and they retire Cannoneer first, that's totally okay. You can revive Cannoneer and just draw a card, so you're still netting 1. If they retire Lazy for whatever godforsaken reason, oh look, a Mick, or oh look, more combos, or really, you can just call a Grenache so that you have 3 units now, and it's even harder for them to trip Blaze, you know? So you can manipulate Overlord, in my opinion, quite easily, but you have to play smart and have foresight about a couple turns ahead in this case. So let's say that I'm going first, I have first stride, and my drop zone's absolute garbage. I'm gonna go into Obadiah and get out a Lazy, a Cannoneer, and King Serpent, because I don't have a King Serpent in drop. I just use stride skill, call King Serpent to build soul. Good. I just use stride skill, call King Serpent in the big soul, into the soul, and have Grenache on board, so I only have 2 units. What I would do here is that I would keep King Serpent on board, just attack normally for 15k, and I would call 1 extra unit on board. Next, I would pass it on to my opponent's turn. It's my opponent's first stride, he didn't have a G guard, he will just stride into the purge or whichever unit. He can retire one of my units. Okay, so I'm down to 1 unit now. If he retires both of my units, okay, I'm down to 2 units now. I'm down to 0 units, sorry. On my next stride, I'm gonna Gouache and refill my board, and I'm gonna call a crit, 2 crits if possible, and a Lazy and a Cannoneer. Now I can begin to field control them. So in that turn, I can +3 on top. I can +3 on top of my drive check. At the end of turn, in this turn, I can +2 because I'm not gonna declare Cannoneer as hollow. So I can +2 on top of my drive check. So at the end of turn, I can retire Lazy and I can revive Lazy. So now I only have the setup of Negrolily and Cannoneer both in the front row. And really, if I'm at 2 to 3 damage, they either have the choice of either doing the purge or Ziegenberg. If they're gonna do Ziegenberg, it's gonna be a lot harder for them to do it because they either retire Cannoneer, and if they have a rear guard left, I can retire that and draw 1, or just straight up draw 1, which is not as bad as retiring Lazy and I get another unit or a 10k buff to my Vanguard on top of having 3 units, so it's even harder to trip Blaze, because Blaze's key word is that if you have more rear guards than your opponent, so being equal to, so having equal rear guards to your opponent will not trigger Blaze. So that's what I want you to get out of this. Aside from that, there's really not much else to say about the Overlord matchup as of this moment. However, with any new additions to this matchup, I will attach it to the PDF. And without further ado, we're gonna get on with the next matchup. And for this matchup, I'm gonna pick Thavas. The next part of the video is gonna be Thavas, also known as Resist Force now. In this matchup, it's gonna be really hard now because Thavas got way better immediately just from this one set. So your win conditions now for Thavas is basically end them by their second stride, because usually you won't be able to survive past their second stride, and these are the units that are going to help you do so. I would also not recommend playing the grade 2 game against Thavas, although majority of the units are GB2 or GB, sorry, just GB in general. Fighting for first stride is not as relevant in this matchup because even on Thavas' first stride, they're still gonna dish a lot of attacks. So unless you on your first stride you can just massively increase your hand or deal out damage, fighting your first stride, it does not really matter. So I would just honestly go into grade 3 and just swing at face, because the grade 2 game is somewhat stronger because some of them are running multiple draws now, so they can actually outdraw you. Well, not really outdraw you, but it's more like their grade 2 game is much stronger than yours, because even though yes we have grade 2 game and yes they're gonna go into the drop zone to retire, we don't have the luxury of hitting the mid game so that we can revive those units multiple times. So really just get as much hand as you can and dish out a lot of damage early. The point of this is you want to end Thavas by their second stride. Anything past their second stride is almost a game ender. So these are the units that are gonna help you do that. The crits are obviously here because on the off chance that you do draw into multiple rough seas and you do have a rampage shade, and that prior to your first Gouache turn that you do have multiple crits in soul, ramp like there's no tomorrow and get prepared so that next one you can dish out multiple damage. Ocean Depth Zombie Well is here just for aggression, because even early game he's still 10k shield after you hit as soon as you hit basically 8 cards in drop zone, which is really easy to do at first stride. He's a 10k shield. Nightstorm is here because he's a combo maker. Obadiah is here on the situation that you absolutely have to Obadiah. I really don't want Obadiah first strike because you do lose aggression and you're just setting up your drop zone, but sometimes the deck just doesn't give you what you need in your drop zone, so you have to Obadiah just to get the right units. Sabreeze is here because yes you can Sabreeze your opponent, but keep in mind this is another matchup where you have to be careful with Sabreeze, because if you cannot refund the cost or you cannot plus more, then you lose this turn. Next turn it'll be really hard to stabilize, especially with Aqua Force, because yes you can drive check 3, but if you don't get anything more than that, if you don't get any more attacks, if you don't get any board control, on Aqua Force's first stride, they will wreak havoc. They can I think now they can hit up to 6+ attacks in their first stride, which is pretty damn disgusting. So main point is to have good defenses, keep your damage low early game, and try to end them early game. Dragut is here on the off chance that on the first stride you Obadiah, the second stride you wanna field control as much. And there's a lot of resist units, that's why Pecan is here. Pecan is a counterblast 1, but really Nightrose can get around that. You just need your first stride to be a setup for Pecan, and to ensure that at the beginning of your turn you have 4 counterblasts and that you have Pecan on board as well as any number of units, so that so that you can fully retire your opponent's board. If they have 2 columns where they have resist, call easy over Pecan so that you can move Pecan to the other column and use Pecan one more time to use Dragut. This is a counterblast 4 with Pecan it's a counterblast 5 strategy, so use with discretion. However, if you are pushed to that limit, if you are pushed back against the wall and you have mediocre hand, let's say 6 units in hand, wiping out and your opponent has a full board, wipe out their board so that they have to use their hand to refuel it. And assuming that they don't have copies of those units, you may have just saved yourself. Negrosonger is here because again he's your early to mid game ender, sometimes late game if it gets to that point and you somehow have 8 face cards in G zone. It's pretty disgusting. Megiddo is here because Megiddo is actually a normal strategy against Aqua Force now as Nightrose. It's not so much a gimmick in this matchup because you want to end them again for second stride, and Megiddo provides that option because Aqua Force does not have any field control during our turn. Your only condition really with this is that you have to maximize Megiddo and ensure that your opponent is at 4 to 5 damage. If he's at 5 damage, it's ideal. If it's at 4 damage, hope to Mother Mary he doesn't get a trigger, or he's just a lucky sacky bastard. Because from that, it's gonna get much harder to kill him. And as soon as you fail Megiddo, you just basically lost the game against Aqua Force. Hew. Mick is here, aggro. Enough said. Bone is here, combo. Basically enough said. That's basically why Bone's here. And overall, Aqua Force, you want to just retire their rear guards and retire their rear guards if at all applicable, and you want to attack their rear guards too early game in my opinion. However, do not focus on solely attacking the rear guards. You want to apply aggro onto the Aquaforce player himself. So let's say on their grade 2 turn, they decide to deploy their units and they only have 3 cards in hand. At that point, you will focus primarily their Vanguard at the end during your turn, because they will at most have 4 to 5 cards in hand. If you focus their Vanguard with those 3 attacks, they're gonna have to guard one of them with either from their hand or from their field, which is okay because you're setting them up so that they have 4 to 5 damage. And then even if they rush you, that means they can't heal out, which is also good. So in this matchup, you kind of just have to control your emotions, and even if you are rushed, do not get scared and just believe in your luck and believe in your opponent's luck, and that they won't, miss unluckiness, that they won't sack you. And honestly, this is more of a conditional game because you have to win by second stride. However, it is manageable, and I give this game roughly a 40% win rate for us, because the Aquaforce does have a better matchup. But unlike Nightrose, Aquaforce have to again top deck into their units to provide aggression. So if they somehow have butts, you have the butts and you can smack the butts. So other than that, that's all I really have to say for this matchup at the moment, because in Aquaforce it's just more primarily their rearguard focused, wave focused, and you just have to really control that. With the resist force, you got in Nightrose, that's why I ran Pecan now. They have a lot of resist units, you want to control that. And overall, with Aquaforce, you just really want to end as fast as you can while also controlling their board. And other than that, I think that's all I have left for the Aquaforce. Again, like with the Overlord, if I do have any more opinions on this, please go check the Google Docs, because I will be updating that more. And towards the New Year's, so towards January and February, when GPT-14 comes out and when Rosa comes out, I will make a new deck profile on Nightrose, as well as any updated combos. Won't be as long as this one, however, it will update the deck for the English players. Other than that, we're gonna move on to the next matchup. The next matchup is more of an honorable mention because it's not out yet, but I will mention. So that we're gonna talk about Gredora next. So for this part of the video, I will be addressing Gredora. In the ENG format, Gredora is not out yet, so we don't have to really worry until 2018. However, I will address it now, and we'll update it in the PDF and the Google Docs down in the description below, because a lot of people have been complaining, as well as been really having trouble with the matchup, and I can agree with them that it's a really tough matchup. So before we start, I just want to go over what Gredora does. So the Gredora Grade 3 is let me get it here real quick. So the Gredora Grade 3 skill is Auto Vanguard once per turn, counterblast on when this unit is placed on Vanguard circle, or when your G unit strides, you may pay the cost, which is counterblast 1. If you do, choose a column your opponent cannot call units to that column during the next turn, and that includes superior calling units. And her auto is Generation Break 1 Soul Blast 1 at the beginning of your ride phase, you may pay the cost. If you do, your opponent chooses a face-up card from his or her G-Zone, turns it face down, and you countercharge 1. So before we start, Gredora Generation Break 1 is currently, to my knowledge, is a complete as much as you can. Therefore, even if you have 0 face-up counterblast as Nightrose, you will not stop them from countercharging. That's basically what it means. And their second start that really is the most relevant right now is Poison Cycle Mutant Deity Overwhelm. Overwhelm is a new GR stride in the Zoo Booster, and her skill is act once per turn, counterblast 1, and G-flip any card from your G-Zone. Drop to the same number of cards as the number of your opponent's rearguards in rest, and if the number of your opponent's rearguards in rest is 1 or less, this unit gets critical +1 and drive +1. So a quad drive and a crit. And Generation Break 3 continuous Dark Device. All of your units get 2k for each face down card in your opponent's damage zone. So to begin right off the bat, what you want to do is you want to control your damage zone and basically have all of your damage zone refunded and all your damage zone cards face up at the end of your turn, therefore reducing Overwhelm's GB3. Because you can't really stop Gredora's at the moment, to my current knowledge and by the way the card is worded, you can't really stop Gredora's counter charge no matter what, as long as they have soul. You may as well like not lock yourself with counter blasts. And then what's gonna happen next? You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to Gredora's soul, because not a lot of units really soul charge in Gredora. As well as that, you wanna steadily increase Gredora's damage. So every turn you want to at least deal 1 or 2 damage consistently. The reason being is that Gredora doesn't have much counter charge engine, and Gredora is no longer much of a paralyzing deck. It is more of a control deck now in terms of locking a column, locking being the right term. And with Gredora, what I want to say is that there are a few ways around it. I'll share with you now with these units. So first, we have Pecan. We have Pecan here because one of the Dark Face's main counter charge is the grade 1. Is where at the beginning of main phase you may soul charge this unit, which provides soul and counter charge 1. So that's really annoying. So Pecan is there so you can remove its resist and basically kill it. So if the Gredora player is smart, he will not put that. He will essentially not put that unit in the same column as Pecan. But on the off chance that it is in the same column as Pecan, oh baby, you better kill that. Palker is also here because my main strategy against Gredora right now is to play the early grade 2 game and to provide front row into both columns. The reason why I want to do this is because regardless of which column she locks out, unless she can paralyze the front row rear guard, I'll still get an attack off that column regardless of how redundantly weak it is. Even because as soon as I hollow that unit, that column I won't be able to call any more units. And even if that unit is paralyzed, I still have 4 stands in the deck, so I still have a high key chance of hitting a stand at sometimes and standing that unit, because they don't really focus on paralyzing anymore. They just focus on locking a column out from being called over, which is a little detrimental, but Nightrose can still work with just one column. It just won't be as strong, so that's why you have to take the early game and take more of some risks and some chances to really win. The crits are here, Rampage Shade and Rusty's Banshee, because you still want to draw. This is more of a grind game now too, because you just really want to pay attention to how much soul they have and how much damage is only currently have base up. What you want to always do is read your opponent's cards if you don't know, and if you see any units that will soul charge aside from their crits or their draws, or basically any unit that will soul charge that's an act and they didn't use it, retire it right away so that they don't have much soul, so that really they only get to counter charge so they get to counter charge less, as well as that with the less counter charge they have, that means that they'll be less likely to basically target your column. The reason being is that if they have one counter blast after their GB1, right? They have one counter blast and they're trying to overwhelm or any other G unit. The problem is they have to now choose between 2 effects, and if they have no counter charge during the main phase, they're choosing 2 effects. You either have overwhelms quad drive because we're Grand Blue and we should not have a lot of remaining units, or they get the draw. So they have to choose between that or the column lock, and if they choose the column lock over overwhelm, then that means that they're sacrificing hand size and pressure. The most that Overwhelm's GB3 is gonna do is just gonna give a 2k buff to every unit on the field, which is really negligible in most circumstances. So that's why I would just say to provide early game aggro and to provide early board, not with key units like Serpent or Lazy, but with units like Pecan or Pakur, where them being on field is not as relevant and they're really useful. There are times where I actually want to call Storm early game and not hollow him. The reason being is that if they lock out that column, right, and Storm is somehow paralyzed, and during my drive check I hit a stand trigger and Storm stands, I will use my other column, which will probably be a Bone plus an X unit column, to call Screaming Banshee to hollow Nightstorm, so I can still get one more call after. So you kind of just have to work with what you have and make the best of it. Serpent's here for counter charge, Cannon is here for retiring pressure, Bone's here for combo, Heal's here because this is more of a grind game, and Turboing will not really matter as much because they may stomp your Galleon turn if they play properly, so don't be trigger happy with your generation guards and play a little conservative in this game. Obadiah is here because you do want to set up your drops sometimes if it's not as ideal. Negrosonger is here because early game aggro, if you can end them honestly, before they can start stunning your columns, all the better, just win the game. Gouache is here for ramp, and Dragut is here because you, on the off chance that you have burst and you have GB2, wipe out their board right away so that they have to work to refuel their board, as well as if they have any previous units on board, on their board that were useful, they're now gone, and you get to field control, and you get to draw, hopefully, since you have Screaming Banshee and Cannoneer and Grenache to countercharge too. Screaming Banshee is here for the obvious reason, as I said earlier, that if you did kill a hollow unit during your early game, like prior to GB, and it's stuck there, you can like strategy wise, you can have it stuck there, so that if you do hit a stand, you can use its skill later on, such as Night Storm, so that you can hollow him with Screaming, therefore getting off more attacks. Or if it's a hollow unit, right? And let's say that you're gonna have multiple units on board, and that your opponent is gonna overwhelm right away, and you wanna get a unit out. The column that unit is in is call locked, so you'll have to use Scream Banshee to get him out. That's why Scream Banshee is there as a tech. Since this is mostly for the English format where we don't have Rosal, even with Rosal, it's still hard because of the fact that they're locking out a column, and basically locked out a front row is kind of crippling, but it's not impossible to win. Megiddo is still here again, early game, and if you can end it early game, you end it, because sometimes it's just not practical for them to use a stretch skill to column lock when they need to basically plus. Sometimes them column locking is better than them using other skills, but in most of the time, if they have one counterblast, you have a 50-50 chance of your next turn not being column locked, which is good. So in terms of their other units, I would just say watch out for one turn, like, so if in one turn they choose not to column lock you, right? You have to predict and really be aware, because if they have the one generation guard that makes you rest units in your back row, yeah, you kinda need to play ahead, and that's not a turn you wanna be on Megiddo when that happens, yeah, because you kinda just cooked your plans right there. Other than that, there's really not much for me to say about Gredora right now. As a whole, Darkface got stronger against Nightrose, however, it's still not impossible to win. It's more like how you can manipulate your strategy so that you can maximize yourself from just 3 rearguard circles, and basically how you can abuse the fact that you may have units stuck in that one column where it's call locked, however, you can still make use of that unit, right? So let's say I had just even a grade 3 Nightrose in the front row, and it's stuck there, call locked, and it's paralyzed. Hit a stand trigger. Now it's a 16k, so it's still relevant, you know? So I would just say not panic and stay calm, and this is more of a grind game now. So because the good news is, even if you just have one unit, the most Gredora's gonna get is a quad drive, which is okay. So that's why you have to ramp and you have to PG the Vanguard. Other than that, they don't really have much attacking presence. So we're still pretty well off, but you just have to really restrict yourself and really not overmill, because this is again a grind game, so you want to play a little bit conservative while dishing out as much aggro and control as you humanly can, and just really take advantage of not having a column locked, because honestly, having a column locked is really detrimental, and is just overall, this is an on strat and an on play skill, so you just have to really play smart of when they do the column lock, because even on ride they can do a column lock. So that is why early game aggro is that much more important, because most of their paralyzing units are GB. So if they're on grade 3 first and they column swap if they column lock something, however you already have a pucker and a bone in that column, it doesn't matter, because even if you can't call units to that column, you can call units to the other column, you know? You can still get off attacks. It just won't be as fluid, because after you retire the unit with the bone, you can't call anything that unit's kind of like, well, that's a little awkward, and there's almost zero way to retire bone from the field, so you're gonna have to make sure that all the other units that you just have bone at the end of turn, and all the other units are out of the board, so that when your opponent doesn't get to draw 2 cards outside of the triple drive, or they don't get to get quad drive and a crit right off the bat. So other than that, there's really not much for me to say with Gredora anymore. It's just more of a luck and prediction based game, because you have to manage your resources, as well as extremely pay attention to your opponent's resources and what they're able to do. When you're facing Gredora, it's more like you have to. It's just more with experience. You have to keep fighting her and never neglect what they drive check. This comes with experience, and you just really have to like know roughly what each card does, whether they're only on place, dark device, or on place paralyze, or on attack paralyze, or on attack dark device. You know, all that good stuff. So you really just wanna be aware. And if for some reason you were really scared, right, and that you mistakenly went aggro because thinking you're dead next turn, but then you looked at Gredora's soul and they had no soul left and they couldn't countercharge, you basically just wasted a turn and you just egged your hand if you Negrosonger just for the lulz of it, you know? And really what you want to do here is that keeping Gredora at low damage early game is not as helpful either, because sure, she locks out a column, but even if she locks out a column, you can still plus with Gouache 3 units, which is ideally what you want to plus to begin with, so it doesn't cripple you as much. So overall, Gredora is a harder matchup, but I would still give it a 50-50 win rate, because the single column lock itself is crippling in of itself, and I believe that with enough technicality, foresight, and awareness, that you can still win as Nightrose. So I hope you guys enjoyed this part of the video, and I will now go over some honorable mentions when it comes to how to play against certain decks. So in this last part of the video, I will mention some honorable mentions that personally to me I have faced, and I feel like I should just give some key pointers about before we close out the video. First, we have Blade Master, which is now, in my opinion, is now inferior to Overlord. However, with Blade Master, since their main card is Ziegenberg, just make sure you retire their field and have at least 2 rear guards. The reason why this is good is because if your opponent has 0 board and even with their retire skill, they're not really going to retire one of your units. If you have 2 units on board, you can revive it immediately with GB2, thus still making you have 2 units. And as a result, they're going to have to drop 3 cards, if not 2, and have to use Ziegenberg's skill to even trip Blaze. So that is why it's a good idea to have 2 units at the end of your turn when they're about to begin their Ziegenberg turns. Furthermore, because they're really Blaze reliant, you can abuse that fact and really just go full on board control, as well as just go full on aggro. So really, like, that's the way to get around Blade Master, as well as with Denial Chicken, have Bail in the front row, because if they Denial Chicken Bail, they basically do part of the work for you, and it doesn't really matter. And remember again that if the unit bonus boosting is no longer there, meaning if it's Denial Griffin or header around it, if it's no longer present on the board, it is no longer you can still call, because the boosting unit being retired is not part of the cost. It's more like a side effect of the cost. The next honorable mention is Dark Irregulars, Shaharat, and that's how you pronounce it, or I may have just really butchered it, and Bladewing. So in terms of Shaharat, it's more of a top deck kind of game, because the moment that the proper Shaharat player goes into Giles, it's almost a game ender unless you are at 3 damage and you have, let's say, and you have the heal trigger and you can super perfect guard from drop zone. So I would just say selectively mill your vanilla PG, as well as try and ramp so that you can get heals while also dishing out a decent amount of aggro. Board controlling doesn't really matter for Dark Irregulars, but it does help quite a bit. So minimize their front row rear guards while also getting yourself hand advantage and also managing your resources. This is more of who can get the best kill turn kind of game. So what you do is basically you just have to be patient and wait, and if opportunity presents itself and you have the resources and the means to combo out a lot of attacks, because Dark Raiders can't really touch your field, they can only really increase their base power by 5k with the rare G guard, strictly speaking to Shaharat. Then you can really wreak havoc. In terms of Bladewing, when it comes to this variant, dishing out attacks is the best way to get around the soul, because even if attack doesn't hit, they're mandated to soul blast too. So keeping your hand up, managing your resources and keeping your deck count in check is the best way around this. And really, just getting to GB8 faster is also a good way around this, because Blade Wing is based around big defense and big hand and their defenses get immensely buffed for no god reason for Soul Blast 2. So really, just keep a count on the Blade Wing player's soul as well as the Shaharat's player's soul, because the amount of cards they have in soul is relevant until they hit 15. Then it's no longer relevant because everything is triggered by then. In terms of key units for Shaharat, ensure you retire their Forerunner because that's a free draw 2, as well as fight grade 2 gaming is not a bad option, so you can grade 2 game Shaharat, but just make sure that you don't suffer from it. And the main units you want to watch out for is Blundermouse or Bladdermouse and Giles. Giles is probably the one that you really just have to watch out for due to the guard restrict and the 10k and a crit for 15 cards in soul. For 15 cards in soul, that's pretty disgusting, and I've lost multiple times to it. So that's all I really want to say about Dark Irregulars. Other than that, it's just more about practice and in a skill matchup. So really just pace yourself and keep an eye on your resources and your opponent's soul. That's about all I can say, and keep up the attacks and the damage, especially in Blade Wing. And finally, the last honorable mention on the list has to be, it's actually two. First one is OTT. OTT is the hardest matchup for this deck, and the only win condition you have on OTT is early game rush. Always, and I mean always, just focus the Vanguard unless the unit is a 12k attacker. Otherwise, just focus the Vanguard. The reason why I'm saying focus the Vanguard is because the moment that Stillwater's GB3 is active, your hand is immensely crippled. And since a lot of your major defensive plays comes from your G Guardians, it got really crippled. So what I would say is that make use of your first and second strides, because you rarely will ever survive a second Stillwater GB3 stride. You rarely will ever survive that. And really, Battle Sisters' main focal point is the fact that they can call board for 0 cost, because they can call the unit, Soul Blast 1, and then draw 1. That's what their grade 2s, I believe, as well as their Forerunner can also do that. And they have a counter charge engine that's a crit, and yeah, it's really gross. So what I would just say is focus more on early game, focus attacking Vanguard, and try to at all costs end game by your second stride. This is where Megiddo comes in really helpful, because Battle Sisters are still susceptible to high rush. So if you have Megiddo, make use of Megiddo, Negrosonger, and Gouache. You can make use of Gouache fully if you ramp up soul instead of ramping hand. You will draw the hand and you will poop it onto the board just to get aggro. So yeah, that's how you mainly handle OTT, and the win rate for that is really small. It's 30% in my opinion. Out of 10 games, only won 3. And that's because of the really consistent early game. But the good news is, because since they're so autopilot and linear, people are stopping to play them, so thank God. And the last honorable mention is ZTB, because yeah, Gear Cancer's still alive and well. Dang. Okay, so with ZTB, the main thing you want to do is just ramp your hand and pace yourself. But at the same time, you want to also rely on your pseudo Denial Griffin to retire some of their units, and your lazy mech combo to beef up your Vanguard during your opponent's turn. The reason being is that ZTB now is primarily focused on multi attacks as well as gaining hand size. So sniping a cruising dragon, a spearhead, or a transit dragon, or the sheep stand during their battle phase will cripple them and will get you 1 card in hand. As well as the mech combo will essentially just beef up your Vanguard, and most of their attacks are below 21k at the beginning, even if they do gear next, so it's pretty useful, because the only way that their front row is buffed is if they use next stage and they unstride. That's really one of the few ways, I believe, that aside from that one rare grade 2 that at the end of battle this unit attack, this unit is binded, but it gets 2k for every single binded unit so I believe that's the only other power spike in the deck to my current knowledge. As well as try and retire their Forerunner as fast as you can. The moment, if you can get first stride and somewhat fight for it, fighting for first stride is not a bad idea, and I would actually suggest it against ZTB, but just try not to fight for it to the point where you're crippling yourself and you're at 4 damage with only 2 cards in hand. Don't do that. But just try and fight for it for a turn, maybe 2, and try and make sure you get Chrono Dran out of the field so that one, they don't get a draw and they don't get a grade 3 on their hand, or they don't get that grade 3 to downgrade with Split Pegasus. That's about the only thing I can say for ZTB. It's just more on hand size and controlling their board during their battle phase. Aside from that, you can it's a pretty even skill based matchup with about a 50 to 60% win rate for Nightrose. So yeah, and if you have Rosal, make full use of Rosal against ZTB because you get 2 free calls right off the bat. Heck yeah! So aside from that, that's the deck profile and the piloting guide. Guys, if you have any more questions regarding the deck and any other further matchups, please feel free to PM me. My Facebook is in the description down below, as well as thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace. 彩りの中で迷いを尖りを楽し続ける